when I feel like nothing. Always feel like I'm running. Both feel we're living worlds apart. It's fucked now, we lost in limbo. Remembering what you said though, and I asked you if we'd make it far. That one last kiss that they write about, my one last wish you could never doubt. I trust angels who fly away from you, and you told me that we'd never die. Gave me so many reasons why we were meant to be. Then she said no, 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 no. No, 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 you should. I've earned the cost and now I've paid it. Oh, no, no, no. Oh, please don't go. I know my face a memory erasing. Been a few years since I heard your voice, yeah. Lost a few here, but it's not by choice, no. Girl, I see your face every day when I look through my phone. Can't delete all these memories, won't leave me alone. Hit my blind side, never saw it coming. You were so wild, but no, I was nothing. And I'm nothing now, nothing's changed. You know I'm just the same. Miss you now, but I hope that someday you explain. That one last kiss that they write about, my one last wish you could never doubt. Trust angels who fly away from you, and you told me that we'd never die. Gave me so many reasons why we were meant to be.
Good morning, my friends. Can y'all hear me? Let me know if y'all can hear me okay. Hope everyone is well. Hope you had a good night, got some good rest. Today is Tuesday, last day of February 2023. We are about to go into March. Spring is on its way. Thank God. Thank you. Okay, so Murdaugh should be starting in the next few moments here. There's not a lot of people in here right now, but I wanted to say that I will be doing a show today while they are on lunch. The Murdaugh trial is on lunch. I will be doing a show between the time of them lunch. It's usually an hour and 15 minutes or so. So I'll be doing a show on Summer Wells and the Murdaughs, kind of talking about both. My birthday is tomorrow. Southern Grammy. Woohoo! Yay! Happy birthday, love. Hello, Just a Girl, Megan, Natalie, Misty, Jody, Jessica, Ollie, Oxenfree. Get out here, you little. Before Slightly, good to see you. Pittsburgh Nurse, Kathleen, Buck Cherry, Bailey, Jessica, Heather, Megan, Cool Gamer, I think I said Jessica again, and Bailey. Thank you all so much for joining. I appreciate it. Yeah, we are at the very end of this trial. Yeah, maybe today and tomorrow they should hopefully rest tomorrow, and hopefully the jury will be deliberating. They could deliberate as a few hours to several days. We just really don't know yet at this point. But court will start here shortly. Yes, so a few more people has came in. More people will join probably once it gets underway. However, I am doing a show today whenever lunch happens in the courtroom. I'm going to be talking about Summer Wells. there's just a lot of feelings going around about Summer Wells supporting Don and Candace or not supporting Don and Candace. I have some words I would like to say about that. I did not watch that HBO special. Everyone keeps telling me, Misty, about that HBO special. I have not seen it. I need to see that. If the state doesn't come with it, he's going to win. I pray not, Golden Girls. God, I hope not. In my opinion, I think I know, God, it's been so long. It really has. I really don't think he is getting out of it at this point. You don't think so, just a girl? I hope you're right. I really hope you are right because um listen, Alex may have had help, but nobody, he's not saying if he did, because then he would have to admit it. It was better than the Netflix one. So, I've heard a lot of people say, and I'm like, I really enjoyed the Netflix one. So I need to. I don't think I have HBO, but I may just have to buy it. You think a hung jury? Really? You're scared that they didn't show enough evidence. The thing that worries me is, did they, like, it's, in my opinion, it's kind of self-evident that he did it, but did they place the gun in his hand? And in my opinion, that is a no. They didn't place the gun in his hand, although I hope that it is enough to convince them uh, that there's nobody out. Uh, there's been no really rumors of anybody else, taking a hit or anything else. So I think Alec is the only one who did it. He did it for his own selfish purposes. I also believe that Maggie was on her way uh, out of the marriage. She hired a out of town forensic accountant who was looking into everything. I think it was a good way for her um, to get a divorce. It was a reason to get a divorce. It was a reason to take half. And I think that came into motion whenever whenever the boat accident happened. A lot of marriages just they just don't make it through a lot of these tough things. It puts a strain on a marriage or any relationship. And, when your child is literally going to court for, you know, I don't know what they charged Paul with. I can't remember, but it was, someone died, a homicide. It was like maybe I forgot what it was. I can't remember. But if prosecutors give a good closing, he may be convicted. Yes, I'm hoping that they seal that deal in the closing. I think he is guilty of sin, proving reasonable doubt to make a jury. Makes me nervous. You know what makes me nervous is I did a video on this. I think I put it out. I don't know if I put it out or not. But, we don't get to see the jury. We don't get to see the jury whenever, we are watching this. However, uh, from what the news reporters are saying and people in the audience, when they look at the jury, when Alec was crying the other day, one of the jury members was crying along with him. You can read that two ways, but to me, that person is showing. I'm worried that that person is showing sympathy for Alec, or maybe she's just a sensitive person because naturally the what happened between uh, that how Maggie and Paul was died. So yeah, yeah, lots to talk about on that as well. They were showing people of dead people. Yeah, they were marriage. That is true. So, and also another thing is, if Alec, uh, makes them laugh. If you make a juror laugh or smile and you see that, that is a bad sign for prosecution. It's a bad sign. It's never a good sign for, especially, which I am flabbergasted to the floor that Alec Murdaugh took the stand. It could have been his Hail Mary, it may have been a saving grace, or it may be what puts, the nail in the coffin. But when you're coming up with a jury, it is fair game all the way around. We just don't know. Everyone can think that he is guilty, but if they don't feel like prosecutors proved it within a reasonable doubt, they can think he's guilty and still rule he is not guilty. So we have to remember that. And we also have to remember, you know, just one juror can say, I don't agree with y'all. And there's nothing you can say to convince me otherwise that I am going to change my mind. And then what, we got a hung jury or, you know, a no guilty. What happens to all these properties? Left to Buster or put on the estate to pay all the people back? They will all be sold. Now, we have to remember, uh, and this is another thing about the jury. They could say, you know what? I believe Alec did this, but I also believe that because of his financial crimes, whether I convict him of murdering his daughter, or not his daughter, his wife and his son, he's going to go to prison for the rest of his natural life, regardless, because of these financial crimes. I do not think he will get away with these financial crimes. They are self evident. And besides, he's literally admitted to it on the stand. And they may say, you know what, not guilty because he's going to jail anyways, and the prosecutors didn't prove it enough for me. I hope I'm wrong. Young widow, the state has a 65 million lien on everything. Yeah, it's going to be, it'll be sold and it'll be, divided up based upon who Alec owes, and they will divide it equally. You can't just pay uh, you can't just pay like one bank off and leave all these other people out. It's not constitutional. You can't do it that way. If whatever it is, uh, the people that he owes, uh, they will it'll get sold, liquidated, whatever, and be divided. I heard the property where it happened is already pending for 3.8 million. I have heard that it was up for sale as well. I don't know. I mean, he got that. Uh, I think he got the property. He was from a client and stuff, but I really think he probably got the property out of a bet or gambling or even a DRUG deal. Legally, Buster has no power. That is correct. That is correct. He has no power over it whatsoever. Now, his grandfather left him money, an inheritance. They cannot do anything with Buster's inheritance. That is one thing that nobody can touch. Also, which, in my opinion, uh, I would say it's more likely than not, although we have no evidence of this, and because it's extremely hard to know, is that Murdaugh likely, in my opinion, almost certainly, has offshore accounts. And that can never be touched with either. And Buster will be just fine regardless. He's going to be fine regardless of whatever he does or whatever. But is this the end of the Murdaugh era in these in the low country of South Carolina? I think it is. I think the days and Alec took that down within just a matter of a couple years. Something that has been so uh, really a pillar of the community, no matter if you think they were dirty or no matter what your view of them, they were a big pillar of that community for generations. Have you ever listened to phone calls between him and Buster while in jail? Yes, Golden Girls. Actually, today I'm going to be talking about one of those phone calls about Alec and Buster talking during lunchtime today. Uh, after when the trial is on lunch, I will be going live on camera, be doing a live. I'm going to be talking a little bit about Summer Wells and a little bit about Murdaugh. It's the only time that I can fit it into my schedule of going live. I've needed to go like live in the last couple days, but like of the morning, I get my kids ready and everything, and then I'm usually running around for work. I have to go different places for my work, and I've been traveling at least an hour and a half each direction, and then I have to drive 30 minutes to pick up my kids, another 30 minutes there, another 30 minutes back, and everything. And then after I get home and make dinner and, do homework and all that stuff with the kids, I am so freaking tired. I just can't do it. So, yeah. So work is difficult. It's you got to grind harder than ever now. Everything is the cost of living is going astronomical. I mean, they just raised my kids' tuition. It's like, and all the things you have to pay that's not included in the tuition, it's just crazy. But, it's an investment that will be worth it, I'm sure, in the long run. Um, I've never been more addicted to anything, but hearing the amount of pills he had at one time blew my mind. It really did. And, you know, Alex says that he was addicted. Was he really that addicted? Uh, I know a doctor, uh, and I'm going to talk to him about this. I don't know if he'll come on my show or not. I don't even know if he's allowed to come on my show or not. Uh, but he works for a hospital that my husband knows him really well, but he does addiction treatment and stuff. Like he's a legit psychiatrist, whatever, the one that prescribes medicine. Um, and I just want to say, like, have you ever seen anybody that says that they were like took this many pills? So I think it would be interesting. Also, I am getting, uh, I'm trying to get my friend Tanya, uh, who works for CPS, to come on regarding just her opinions on the things that she has seen in the Summer Wells case. Obviously, it's a different state. She doesn't, just the things that she knows from the outside and stuff, and just for her to answer questions regarding, your questions about, you know, the boys and CPS and how works. Of course, it's a different state. I don't know if they all have like the same rules or not, but I thought it would be very interesting. Um, and I witnessed if she would drive hours some days to get them. My mom would take similar. amounts during her addiction. She passed last year. Wow. I'm so sorry, just a girl. An eyewitness, and she would drive hours, sometimes days to get them. Yeah. Yeah. When you are addicted to anything, it is, you know how ridiculous it is, some of the things you do, but it is your brain that is really sick, and your brain is just wanting comfort, to not go into this
All rise.
withdrawal. Okay,
Court
we're
is
in
now
order.
in session. Judge Newman presiding. Be seated.
Good morning. Anything before the jury comes?
Your Honor, we were informed this morning by the state that there are potentially 7 reply witnesses. And before we get into that, we looked at the cases on reply, including State versus Prather, which is a 2020 case. And I want the court and I want the state to understand, and we think many of these witnesses have already testified. They're these very few new witnesses. They've already testified in this case, and they're being called to reply to, the way we read the cases, new matters, new evidence, something. But we have a right under the case law, State versus Watson, which is a 2003 case, 353 SC 620, 579 SC 2nd 148, to serve rebuttal. So
You said a right to?
it's discretionary with the court, but I would submit to the court that under the criteria set out in this case, you would determine that if they raised new matters, that we have a right to respond to those. Now, we're told that Dr. Reamer, their pathologist, is going to testify. And if you remember correctly, Your Honor, and I've looked at the YouTube, that's all we can get at this point, which is a video of it. Dr. Reamer's previously testified that she did not believe this to be a contact wound to the head. I submit they're going to try to repeat that testimony or elaborate on that testimony, and that was the only issue that our pathologist raised, but he believed it was a contact wound, and why. She's already testified why it wasn't a contact wound to the head, and why. So are we going to have to get our pathologist back here to counter hers if she raises some new issue? Or perhaps, Your Honor, I need 7 reply witnesses. It was 2, now it's 4, now it's 7. I mean, this is a process that's got to stop at some point. We're going to be here next week. There are 2 expert witnesses that have already testified in this case. Now, one of them I would concede, Ken Kinsey, they're an appropriate reply witness based on Mr. Palmbeck's testimony yesterday. But the pathologist, again, to testify it wasn't a contact wound to the head, she's already testified to that. And some of these other witnesses, law partner members, to testify what they do or do not remember about the night in question. Again, they've already asked them that on direct in their previous testimony. So this has got to end at some point. We spent 2 weeks on 2.5 weeks of the 6 weeks on financial matters. In my opinion, could have been done in a day. That's just my opinion. But I'd ask the court, as we make objections, to consider and maybe even proffer what they're going to put up before we get in front of the jury, so that Your Honor can make an evaluation before we start down that road for a half-a-day witness that may not add anything to the case. Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, state's certainly aware of the scope of reply testimony as it relates to the pathologist. There are actually a number of issues on which their pathologist challenged the findings of Dr. Reamer, and she's here to explain why those conclusions are incorrect, including his reliance on particular factors, and why ultimately his conclusions are wrong. I think that's directly in the scope of reply testimony. My focus here on reply is not to just repeat testimony, but to focus on specific issues raised during the defense case, that specific witnesses have something that contradicts or puts that in the appropriate context, and that is our focus. We intend to move very expeditiously through that. But ultimately, as it relates to the pathologist, just like Kenny Kinsey, it relates specifically to the conclusions offered by the defense experts. It is not just mere repetition of testimony already received, but comment on factors identified by those defense experts and why those are incorrect.
Your Honor, briefly, let's take Mr. Kinsey, for instance. There was testimony yesterday that our expert believes there were two shooters. Obviously, something that he was not asked. Obviously, something that's a new matter. Obviously, proper for reply. But there are minute details, perhaps, that will be these witnesses will be questioned about. And simply because there might be a hook doesn't mean they get to go into everything. I mean, this is, again, this was an estimate, 3-week trial. We're now in week 6. This will go into week 7. It seems to me the state's position is let no dead horse go unbeaten. This has got to stop. Thank you.
Of course, the defense, of course, when we had the meeting with Judge Price, at the time, we all agreed with that estimate. It was not just the state. I realize this is going long. I intend to move expeditiously, but the state has the right and the opportunity to do appropriate rebuttal evidence to a defense case, and that will be the focus of the testimony here today.
Your Honor, the right they have is the same right I have. It's the right you allow. I just want to make sure he hadn't got a right to do anything. Thank you.
Well, certainly the state cannot retry the entire case, but the state has the right to reply to contradict certain issues presented by the defense or certain issues of credibility. It has to be finely tailored such that we don't create a situation where a court will be compelled to allow rebuttal, which is almost unheard of. You mentioned State v. Prather. That was my trial. I was a trial judge in that case in Lexington County, a murder case wherein I allowed reply testimony, actually by a SLED agent. The Court of Appeals, in a 2-1 decision, reversed the conviction. Then the Supreme Court reversed the Court of Appeals and reinstated the conviction that was obtained before me. So it can be a controversial and contentious issue. It almost always is, because there has to be a limit to the back and forth. I'm surprised to hear the number of reply witnesses that the state says that it intends to offer. I do not know. The case is so complex. We've had so much testimony. I cannot sit here in advance and rule as to what would be appropriate and what not. I just have to deal with it on an issue by issue, objection by objection basis. And with that, so bring the jury. Sure, thank you. Good morning. Day number 26. 26. You have heard the defense's case. Now the state gets an opportunity to reply. And you may call your first witness.
May it please the court, Your Honor, the state calls Ronnie Crosby.
Place your left hand on the Bible and raise your hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Thank you. You'll have a seat on the stand. If you would state your name for the record and spell your last name, please.
Ronnie Crosby, Crosby.
Good morning, Mr. Crosby.
Good morning.
Just want to go over a few things very quickly in reply to some of the defense case. And the first thing I want to ask you is, you had previously testified about your close relationship with Paul, didn't you?
Yes, I did.
All right. And over the years, did you ever have call to ride around the property with Paul, yours or his?
More on my property, but some on one or more occasions at Moselle as well.
What, if anything, would y'all carry when y'all rode around the property like that?
Why? This is about Paul?
In response.
Yes, sir. This will be in specific response to the defendant's testimony and in his statements as well. I can be specific. I don't want to do a speaking response, but I can ask another question and maybe put it in focus, Your Honor.
Okay.
All right. You heard prior testimony that you don't go around looking for hogs in the daytime because they're nocturnal from the defendant. Did you not? Are you familiar that was what was said?
Objection, Your Honor, if it's based on what he's heard or seen. I mean, is this a comment made to him, or if we're going to delve into the appropriate way to hunt hogs day or night? I mean, this is not proper reply. I object.
All right. You want me to?
Yeah, if you don't mind asking a question again.
Sure. All right. First question is, have you gone riding around the property with your property or the Moselle property with Paul before?
I have.
All right. And what, if anything, would y'all carry when you would go riding the property?
I believe the only time I rode with Paul was would have been looking for hogs, and then more so on my property.
All right. And what, if anything, would you carry when y'all were looking for hogs?
Objection, Your Honor. Riding with Paul on his property, not Moselle.
Objections overruled.
Well, people who have hogs on their property, as a general rule, you would always take a rifle with you, be it day or night, because you never know when you're going to see hogs, and because they are such a nuisance, as I spoke to earlier in my testimony, you always want to be prepared to shoot them. So you would generally have some type of rifle and we with you, a long gun.
Objection, Your Honor. He's giving an opinion. He's not been qualified as an expert.
Objections overruled.
All right. You've had plenty of experience in killing hogs on your property?
Yes, I would disagree with Mr. Harpootley, and I am pretty much an expert about killing hogs.
All right. And you've had plenty of opportunity to go hunting with Paul?
Objection, Your Honor. I apologize to the witness.
And you've had plenty of opportunity to go hunting with Paul or have him hunt on your property?
Yeah, yes, I've been with him, and he's been on my property many more times. I didn't go with him every time he was on my property, but that's the general rule, that you would have a rifle of some sort. Paul, as this jury's been told over and over, was fond of that 300 Blackout. I've been with him while he had it. I usually use some other type of AR framed gun to shoot hogs.
A 223?
Well, 223 or a 6.5 Creedmoor, which is on a AR-10 frame.
Is it common though to carry your rifle and look for hogs in the daytime and to see hogs in the daytime?
Yes, you don't always see them. Sometimes night's better if you're using a night vision scope, but I've killed hundreds of hogs in the daytime riding. It's just something because there's such a nuisance in the low country and really across the state right now and across the South that we have a rule that you don't ride the property without a rifle because you want to try to eliminate as many hogs as you can, and we also trap them.
To your observation, did Alec have a good relationship with the local law enforcement community?
My observation was had a very good relationship with, probably better than the rest of us, saving his father.
Did you on multiple occasions go over in great detail Alec's original story as to what he did on the night of the murders?
On more than one occasion, we discussed his story as I testified to, I don't know how many weeks ago that was, but it was a while.
And what, if anything, did the defendant tell you about whether or not he checked Paul and Maggie before calling 911?
My understanding of what he told me was that he checked them before he called 911.
And was he clear on that point to you?
That was clear to me.
When was the first time you've heard the defendant's latest story admitting that he was in fact at the kennels minutes before the victims were killed?
I haven't watched all of this trial like a lot of people have, but when I heard that Alec was taking the stand, I believe it was last Thursday, I did set up my workstation so that I could watch his testimony, and it would have been when he told you that he was at the kennels was the first time that I'd ever heard that.
Did Alec ever tell you that he thought the boat case had anything to do with the murders?
Consistent with what Alec told in his testimony, he specifically told me that and told us that he did not believe that anyone on the boat had anything to do with it. I don't recall any other conversations with him related to the boat case, but he specifically did not believe, and I think that's what he said last week, that anybody on the boat. But as far as anybody outside, there was a lot of speculation going on, but I don't remember ever discussing that with him. And
With him.
right, because we wouldn't know. I mean, everything beyond was, I don't know. It would have been speculation, but I didn't have a conversation with him about that.
Did you ever have a conversation with the defendant about Barrett Boulware needing money because of his illness?
And you're referring to, yes, I did in I believe it would have been June of 2018.
What was that discussion?
Barrett and Alec were very, what I consider to be very close.
Improper reply.
Yes, sir. The defendant during cross-examination was specifically asked about this particular transaction and that we're about to discuss. And Mr. Crosby's testimony would be in response to what the defendant said about the money, and in as much as he tried to imply that, well, Barrett kind of owed me money anyway, as justification for him stealing money from one of his best friends.
He did not ask him about a conversation he had with Mr. Crosby about that money. This isn't proper reply. This is going off on another tangent.
Overrule the objection.
Can you tell us about that conversation, please, Mr. Crosby?
Yes, and if my year's wrong, but I believe, because I didn't know exactly what you were going to ask me, and I can go back and look at documents, but I'm sure it's in one of these exhibits when that occurred, the materials that Ms. Seckinger put in. I believe in June of 2018, Barrett, who was a good friend of Alec's, lot closer to me. I think they were, in my perception, very close friends. But I had become friends with him and had done a couple of real estate transactions with him. That summer, I received a call from his son-in-law. Barrett was in the Mayo Clinic with stage 4 colon cancer.
Objections overruled.
I do know for a fact that he was in the Mayo Clinic suffering, being treated for stage 4 colon cancer, and I received a call as to whether I could help Barrett financially.
Your Honor, hearsay, a call.
Objections overruled.
Because his wife did not have enough money to stay. Barrett had some waterfront lots.
Objection, Your Honor, hearsay. All this material came from somebody else.
The objection overruled.
I do know this from firsthand knowledge, Mr. Waters. I had already bought a lot from him, but anyway, he had a lot that he asked if I would buy so that they would have money to be able to, for his wife to stay down in Jacksonville while he was receiving cancer treatments. And I had a conversation with Alec about that.
Tell us about the conversation you had with Alec about that, please.
I just told him, man, it's bad. You know, Barrett's looks like he's going to die, and he did die in September of that year. And he acknowledged it, and he said that it was good what I was doing for Barrett, because he knew that he was in bad financial shape and obviously bad health.
And you're obviously a member of this law firm, and your review of the records as all of this came to light, did that conversation take place around the time that the defendant was stealing some of Barrett's money?
Yes, through this investigation that y'all have heard about into the financial stuff starting in early September of 2021, we started going through a lot of files, and as part of that process, somewhere I determined that in June of 2018, I believe, and I can't tell you the exact figure, but I believe it was a $70-something thousand insurance check that came to the firm on behalf of Mr. Boulware that didn't go through the firm. It was just Alec took it that same month that we had that conversation. And then later there was some more money taken after he died.
I'll show you what's been marked as Exhibit 575. States 575, see if you recognize that.
Is that David? Is that one of the sled agents?
Do you not recognize him?
Is that David Williams?
Well, I'm asking you.
I believe that's David Williams.
Okay. Your Honor, this time I'd offer States 575 in the evidence.
Objection, relevance.
What is the relevance?
Your Honor, the defendant specifically testified that when he had that initial interview with David Owen on June 8th, as he manufactured his decision to lie about such a crucial fact, it was because he thought that David Williams was the guy interviewing him. This is simply a picture of David Williams. The jury can assess the legitimacy of that claim.
Your Honor, I object. Never, ever said David Williams. He said David. That's the record.
Objection
Never said it was that guy.
It's admitted over objection.
Can I have the element, please? All right. That's who you recognize as David Williams?
Yes, I didn't know him. I got to know him through this investigation, and I do believe he was the agent that was involved in the case with Mr. Chief Greg Alexander that was referenced.
Clearly not David Owen, though, correct?
Well, that's not David Owen.
Have you ever tried cases with Alec?
I handled a lot of cases with Alec. I believe the only case I tried to jury with Alec was actually here in this courtroom.
Did you observe him being able to get emotional during that closing argument?
Yes, as a couple months ago when we talked and you asked me what kind of lawyer Alec was, and I told you he was a good lawyer. And one of the things that I think I explained to you was that he was a theatrical type presence in the courtroom, and he could get very emotional doing closing arguments in front of a jury.
Thank you. Please answer any questions the defense may have.
I hate to go here, but let's talk about hog hunting, which I know nothing about, okay?
You might not want to go there then.
I've been here so long, I think I probably do need to learn how to hog hunt. But I guess my first question is this. Did you ever ride Moselle with Alec? Did you ride around Moselle with Alec?
Probably. I know I dove hunted there, so I believe I rode on a Ranger, but I don't ever remember doing much riding with Alec at Moselle. But I know I dove hunted there, and sure, I rode in a Ranger or some type of ATV with Alec, but I don't have a specific.
Well, when you're riding around dove hunting, you got a gun with you, right?
You would?
Would you take a shotgun to hunt dove?
Yes.
Would you take an AR weapon too?
No.
Why? I mean, them hogs are out there, right?
Well, they don't usually come in a dove field when you're shooting dove. So
Well-
I don't know. You just wouldn't, Mr. Hartpootlian, typically. I mean,
But daytime, you're riding around the property, you got a shotgun. You got a slug in that shotgun or you using birdshot?
you would shoot birdshot.
Okay. So if a hog came up, nothing you could do.
If a hog came into a dove field with a bunch of dove hunters,
Well, maybe
they
you're
would
on your
shoot
way-
at him regardless.
Maybe you're on your way to the dove field. The dove field's not right next to the house, is it?
Yes, it's right within a few hundred yards.
Bordered by the swamp?
The swamp's on one end of it, yeah.
Okay. And where do the hogs live during the day primarily?
Well, they can live in the swamp, they can live in a bay, it can be anywhere, but largely in the swamp.
The swamp. So a hog could have come out of that swamp
Yes.
and you were unarmed.
As I said, if a hog came in a dove field near somebody dove hunting, they would probably shot it with birdshot.
Would that kill a hog?
If it was close enough, but unlikely.
But unlikely. So you have, in fact, ridden around Moselle without a gun to kill a hog, appropriate gun to kill a hog.
Well, yes, if I was going over to the dove field, I wouldn't have one.
But you've never ridden as Paul and Alec did that afternoon, just looking at different, like where deer, what do they call them? Where they plant stuff for deer?
Food plots?
Yeah. Or looking around at how these fruit trees were doing. Remember the Snapchat video?
I've never done that with Alec, and that I recall, but I could have in the past, but I don't have a specific recollection.
Or where they planted some corn for, I guess use corn for deer and ducks?
You do, but you don't plant them in the same spot.
No, I get that. One would be near a pond or in a pond or around a pond.
Correct. They had a duck pond.
Right. And then the others would just be out where the deer might come out and try to feed. Right. Look, we don't need to go there.
Yeah, I don't think, yeah.
Okay. But you've never rode around like that with them, looking at different plantings and that you remember.
I don't have a specific recollection of doing that with Alex.
Okay, and you're not telling this jury that they would do that without a blackout. Would it bother you or offend you or scare you that they're riding around the property during the daytime without the blackout?
No, I was answering questions about what's normal if you were looking for hogs or if we were just riding my property. Most people carry a gun, but no, I have no idea what they had with them or what they were doing.
And I think Alec testified they were looking for signs of hogs because you could come back. It'd be a lot easier to find those hogs at night, right? So let's talk a little bit about what you heard from Alec the night of June 7th. You would agree with me that, well, let's ask it this way. What your practice is primarily personal injury, is that correct?
It is.
Catastrophic injuries.
Well, I handle a lot of catastrophic injury cases.
Cases, for instance, where a husband and wife are riding down the road and hit by a tractor trailer. And by way of example, maybe you could give me something more specific. Husband's killed, wife's severely injured. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
Now, is it your experience in people who undergo, maybe they're not hurt, but their loved one is hurt, maybe killed, in that situation, that's a traumatic experience for the surviving person, correct? To see their loved one killed?
Yes.
Okay. And so when you sit down with those folks and begin to recount with them what happened that night, oftentimes, I do a little work like you do, oftentimes those folks misremember or get times wrong, or because they went through this very traumatic experience, and the closer to that experience, the more likely they are to get some things wrong. Times, for instance. Is that your experience?
They can, but I also find that people who have been involved in traumatic experiences try to be very accurate with the details because they know it's important to me representing them.
And typically, you don't go out to the scene of the crime and interview, or the scene of the accident and interview them that night, do you? Typically?
Well, typically you don't because you don't know it's happened.
Well, sometimes in the old days they used to do that, but they don't do that anymore, right?
That would be very rare.
So you're seeing them in your office weeks later?
It can be days, can be weeks.
Okay. And in that atmosphere, it's a little more conducive to them being as accurate as possible, right?
It is, but oftentimes we also have the benefit of recorded interviews when there's a catastrophic injury. Typically, the highway patrol will try to interview people as quickly as they can, and they will. We oftentimes have it on video off a dash cam or sometimes body cam, but and a lot of times written statements.
And written statements from witnesses who saw it happen.
Correct.
And so when you interview those people, they have the benefit of reviewing whatever you have to help them get a better recollection of what happened, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So the instance you're talking about where Alec told you he turned him over before he made the 911 call, whatever it was, I'm not quite sure. Before, I think is what you said. If that would be inconsistent with something he says later on, after having reviewed other people's statements, looking at video, that would not be unusual in your business. I think you just said it would not be unusual, correct? Strike that.
You're trying to take me somewhere that you probably don't want to.
Oh, no, I think I want to.
Answer the question.
Withdraw the question. Let me ask you this question. Maybe this gets to the meat of matter here. Have you had to come out of pocket to pay back the money he stole?
Yes, and if
How much?
I
Don't tell me you don't know.
well, we're still counting, Mr. Hartbootlian.
Well, how much have you paid so far?
We have had to borrow millions to pay back.
No, how much
business
have you
to
had to come out of pocket?
Well, when you borrow it, you got to pay it back, and I couldn't tell you how much has exactly been paid back as of we sit here today. But
10
yes, and if you're implying that I would come in here and somehow shade truth in any way because of that, I would take high offense with that, Mr.
I'm not concerned
Hartbootlian.
about your high offense. Are you angry at him for stealing your money?
I have no feeling one way or the
You
other.
don't have any feeling about Alec Murdaugh betraying you and stealing your money. I admire you. I don't know that I could look beyond that.
Objection, Your Honor.
It's sustained. There's not a question. The jury is to disregard the argument.
You are not angry with Alec Murdaugh?
I have had anger with him, extreme anger, Mr. Hartbootlian, because of what he did to my law firm, my partners, my client, his clients, our clients, what he did to his family, what he's did to so many people. Yes, I experienced a lot of anger, but you can't walk around with anger. You have to find a way to deal with it and move forward. And I have done that. And if you suggest, you are dead wrong. If you think I've come in here and told this jury something because of money, when we're talking about two people who were brutally murdered, then you're headed in the wrong direction.
Do you think he did it?
I don't have an opinion. I don't have the benefit of the materials you have.
Well, let me ask you this. You're angry with him, stole millions of dollars from your firm. You admit your firm's not even called the Murdaugh firm anymore, right?
It is not. I don't admit that I'm angry right now. I told you I've gotten away from that. I don't have any feelings because you can't walk around with anger. I have been very, very angry about it because of what he's done. And he did it in a very callous way, a very deceitful way.
And you carry no, I'm sorry, maybe I just saw some anger there. Were you angry just a moment ago?
No, you keep trying to push a question and don't want to accept my answer, which is what it is.
That you've just given your Zen, your Nirvana, your whatever the.
Your Honor, objection.
Hard to you might not understand, but it's hard to walk around with anger, and hard to even walk around with it when it's with somebody you didn't know and didn't understand. So you might have be that way, but you know, I've got to function, I've got a family, I got to move on with life.
Were you aware that he went to rehab in 2017?
I was not,
Really?
other than what was said by Alec in this courtroom.
You never were aware he had a drug problem?
I was unaware.
Okay. Sort of.
And if I would have been known, I would have tried to help him.
You indicated that he could be emotional in trying a case, correct?
He could be. He was theatric, much like his father and grandfather had a courtroom theatrics, and he could be emotional.
Any of your other partners that way? Johnny Parker?
No, Johnny's quite the opposite. Johnny's very
Laconic, I believe, is the best way to describe it.
he doesn't show emotion.
Nobody else in your firm was theatric or emotional?
Not to Alec's level.
You don't know any other lawyers in the state that go to that level?
You're asking me a question right now. I don't know. You might yourself. I don't know. I don't know what other lawyers do. I'm usually trying cases against defense attorneys, so I don't get to see plaintiffs' lawyers anymore.
Okay. Well, I want to thank you for. Well, let me ask you one last thing. This Bullware guy that he stole all the money from, Mr. Bullware, remember him?
Yes, I remember him.
How much money did you steal from him? Do you remember?
He stole 70-something thousand in June of 2018. Mr. Bulwer died in September, I believe, of 2018, and I believe another 270-something thousand after Mr. Bulwer's death sometime in around February of 2019.
Have you and your partners paid Mr. Bulwer's estate or his folks back?
Yes, I met with them personally.
Okay. And even though it's cost you your firm and it's cost millions of dollars to you, you have forgiven him? You bear him no ill?
I didn't say I forgave him.
You're just not angry about it anymore?
I said I have no feelings. And I had to work on that, Mr. Harpootlian. You know, when you go through what we've gone through, not only the trauma of losing people we loved in a double homicide, seeing the aftermath, and then learning that someone you worked with for more than 20 years had been stealing throughout a period of time and deceiving us, there's a lot of emotion there. And yes, it was bad in the fall of 2021, and I have found a way to have no feelings. It's not forgiveness. It's just I don't have
You're not
any
angry
feelings.
here today. You're not angry at him at all.
I'm not angry.
Okay.
If I raise my voice, it's only because of the implication that you were trying to
The
make out of it.
implication that you might not want to help him in front of this jury here today because let me finish the question. Because he destroyed your firm. He stole millions of dollars you had to pay back. He deceived you. All that's away and is not influencing your testimony here today at all. If you'd answer that yes or no, then you can explain.
All those things happened, and it does not influence my testimony. I take the oath that I just took very seriously. And if you got any indication that anything I said was inaccurate, I'll be glad to address it with you.
Well, the jury can judge that. Thank you.
How long did you know Alec?
Since the late 90s.
And knowing what you know now, was he able to look you in your eye and lie convincing to you day in and day out?
He did.
And was he able to look juries in the eye and display emotion?
That is not appropriate redirect, and it's leading.
Objection sustained.
Mr. Harpootlian asked you about some of the things that you have gone through. And is your issue with Mr. Harpootlian's questioning the implication that you would come in and shade things in front of this jury?
Objection, leading.
What is your concern with Mr. Harpootlian's questioning of you? Can you express that to the jury, please? All that he just went through with you, sitting up on the stand, having to deal with this, what is your problem with what he was trying to say?
Well, I fortunately, to start with, I took an oath to tell the truth. But we as lawyers also have oaths and obligations to a court. And it goes a lot deeper than just that oath. We are bound by rules of professional conduct, ethical rules that I take very seriously as a lawyer. To my knowledge, I enjoy a very good reputation as far as being a person of integrity. And that's what I took issue with, is him attempting, because he cannot impugn my integrity.
That's fair. Would you take a 22 if you went out looking for hogs?
Possibly a 22 Magnum, which is a long rifle.
Which is a long rifle?
Yes.
You take a long rifle, not a pistol, is that correct?
Yeah, I would never, I'm not a good shot with a pistol, but I would never take a pistol.
And what was Paul's favorite gun for shooting hogs with?
I knew he always had a 300 blackout, but I don't know if he shot him with anything else.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Anything further?
I'm sorry, Your Honor, I just can't leave this alone. Is the 300 blackout that's in evidence his favorite? The 300 blackout with a thermal scope on it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Step down. We'll call your next witness.
Your Honor, the state calls Dr. Reamer.
Do you swear or affirm the testimony that you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth to help you God?
I do.
Thank you. Can you have a seat on the witness stand? You will state your full name again, please, and spell your last name for the record.
Yes. It's Dr. Ellen Reamer, R-I-E-M-E-R.
And just to advise the gallery, if everybody could seal the monitors, please, and the media be advised of that. Dr. Reamer, I want to move through this. Yes. And Dr. Reamer, I don't know if I'm necessarily even going to put them up on the screen. I am going to show you some images. I know the jury have seen these, and I don't want to belabor the point, and I want to move quickly. But just very quickly, you've been previously qualified as an expert in this trial in forensic pathology. Is that correct?
Yes,
And you've done how many autopsies? Remind the jury, please.
around 5,500. Since I was last here, I've done a few more.
I can't see a monitor anymore.
Okay. I haven't put anything up yet. You actually conducted the autopsies of Paul and Maggie in this case?
Yes, I did both of the autopsies at the request of the Colleton County coroner, who called MUSC Forensic Pathology, requesting autopsies on 2 individuals that died under his jurisdiction. I was not asked by the prosecution to perform an autopsy. It was an independent autopsy.
Your autopsy is independent. You're not hired by the prosecution or law enforcement or anything
No,
like that?
it's just at the request of the coroner.
All right. You've had a chance to hear the testimony of the pathologist for the defense that testified yesterday?
Yes.
All right. I want to ask you a couple of general questions and then move specifically to some of the conclusions that individual reached. But just very quickly, with skin tags, can you tell me the reliability of that in determining directionality just as a general matter?
Yeah, well, we look at these things, but just like every other thing at, finding at the autopsy, we take it in the context. So sometimes skin tags support your findings, and sometimes they're not really so reliable. So, skin tags don't tell you necessarily the direction of a wound, especially going through very soft tissue.
And I'm going to show you a couple of exhibits that have been previously introduced in this particular case. I'm going to try to be very careful with these. I'm going to show you what's been marked as exhibits, defense exhibits, 159, 160, and 161. And if you could take those out and just tell me if you recognize those. And again, please be mindful of the direction in which those images are presented. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Yes, I've seen these.
All right. And what are those images of?
They're autopsy photographs of Maggie.
All right. You heard the testimony of the defense pathologist who testified yesterday that the directionality of the injury to the side of Maggie's head with the associated injury to the breast and the abrasion actually was coming from the top down as opposed, and I say top down as if somebody's standing upright, as opposed from going towards the bottom of the body up, correct?
Yes, that's
All
what I
right.
said.
And can you please look at the images that you have and explain to the jury your conclusions and why that defense pathologist is incorrect, who didn't conduct the autopsy to begin with, why he's incorrect?
Okay. Do you want me to show the photos?
You can, and let's just go ahead and put them both up on the screen. So I'll take them. And if you could step down, please, if that's okay with your arm. And first, I'm going to show defense exhibit 160. Are we secure? We good? All right. All right, and that's defense 160. And Dr. Reamer, if you can again explain to me your specific findings and how they relate to the testimony from yesterday.
Yes. So we have the abrasion on the left shoulder, clavicle area, and then we have an entrance defect in this left side of the face. We can see a hole there. It's a hole. And there was a defect in the left temporal lobe of the brain, which was included in my autopsy report. That could only have happened from that being an entrance wound.
Okay. And you mentioned during your testimony the concept of a diastatic fracture. Does that in any way relate to your conclusion in this regard?
Yeah, well, the diastatic fracture is when there's a separation of skull bones along suture lines, which solidify during childhood. And usually it takes a lot of intracranial pressure to fracture a skull along the suture line.
All right. And does that relate to the conclusion that this had to be an entry wound?
Yeah, well, that's a finding. That doesn't prove that this is an entrance wound, but what I do, I have a path through the left temporal lobe, and there's, that, and that is that it was associated with the diastatic fracture because of the increased pressure in the brain.
All right, and one of the things you're telling this jury is you who actually,
Objection leading.
were you actually able to observe a hole associated with an entry wound when you physically performed this autopsy?
Yes, I physically performed the autopsy, and the way I determine direction is I have a hole below the left ear, which went into the brain, and so that's not going to happen in the opposite direction. And I understand that people can look at pictures. That's like a two-dimensional view, but doing the autopsy makes certain information available to the pathologist that is not available to an individual not performing the autopsy. And I had that information in my report, which was not, which was, I guess, overlooked.
Overlooked by the defense
Right.
pathologist.
Yes, I'm sure.
All right. I'm going to show you now Defense Exhibit 161. And there was some testimony from the defense pathologist about trying to determine directionality from this particular image. And can you please tell the jury why that pathologist is wrong?
All right. Well, when we have tears of the skin, and this is a lot of tears of the subcutaneous tissue, especially in a very soft area of the body where there's a lot of fat, there's a lot of stretching, and it doesn't necessarily, we can move the tissue of the breast, and sort of, you can even get the points to go into a different direction. This is not very impressive. It's not even really worth observing any of the skin tags. It's really very non-specific, and I think he has a very good imagination for for seeing that in this photo. And it's, skin tags can be there. Sometimes they support your findings, sometimes they don't support, but they don't take the place of determining the path of the wound by actually following it through the body.
I'm going to show you finally what's been marked as Defense 159. And is this also a representation, sort of the hole that you determined and were able to physically observe as a entrance wound on the side of Maggie's head?
Yes.
All right, let's talk a little bit about Paul. And you heard the defense pathologist and their subsequent expert talk about there being a contact wound to the top of Paul's head. Is that correct?
That's what he said.
All right. And you, of course, have already testified during your direct testimony that there's no way for this to be a contact wound, but now you have specific observations about the defense
Yes.
conclusions.
Well, I didn't think it was necessary for me to point out every physical feature of the wound that demonstrates that the entrance was to the top of the left shoulder and then went into the left side of the head before exiting the top of the head. Now, before I go on, I do want to say that I agree with the book that keeps being brought up, that when there is a contact shotgun wound to the head, there's massive gas expansion within the cranial cavity, within the skull. And what that does, it doesn't just create a hole with some, bones. I understand this was like the most severe thing you have ever seen. And you probably can't imagine that the damage to the head could be any worse. But a contact shotgun wound to the head with the associated gas expansion to the skull would not have, his face was basically intact. We would have had tears of the skin, and his eyes would have been either displaced from the orbital bones. The orbital bones were intact. Anytime there's massive gas buildup within the cranial cavity from a contact shotgun wound to the head, which the book does say is when we have the worst gas expansion, the entire face, he would have not even had a face left. I mean, it sounds, I know what you saw was awful, and it was absolutely awful, but the damage would have been a lot worse. He would have had, like, the sides of his head would have down, he would have had, you know, his entire face would have been split open, because there's no way all of that gas expansion could occur and not cause fractures of these delicate bones in the face. His forehead was even still there. So, you know, I agree with the book that a contact shotgun wound would cause severe gas expansion and damage to the head. What we have here is not consistent with a contact shotgun wound to the head. The damage to the head would have been much worse, even though this was already horrible. Okay, that being said, there are photographs. Okay.
Yep, and I'm going to put up what's already been admitted into evidence as States 486. And if you could, Doctor, just talk a little bit about this image as it illustrates what you're talking about with the face, but also, if you could, we'll go ahead and talk about what you with the face, and then I want to talk about the shoulder a little bit as well.
There's no skin, it's like torn apart of his face. His eyes are still in their correct locations. You know, it's hard to imagine that, you know, anything could be worse than a hole at the top right side of the back of the head. But in my 20 plus years of experience doing autopsies and seeing contact shotgun wounds to the head, which are associated with massive gas expansion in the skull, this entire face, he would have had tears. The, you know, eyes would have been either hanging down or lost, blown out. There's no way that these features are consistent with a contact shotgun wound to the head.
All right. Now, there was some discussion by the defense pathologist about shaving the top of the head for stippling or checking for stippling. And can you comment on the necessity of that in your actual
There would not have been soot because the features of this wound are not consistent with a shotgun wound to that location. First of all, the damage to the head and face would have been far more severe than it was. And then also the wounds to the shoulder and left side of the cheek have all the features of entrance wounds.
All right. And one of the things discussed by the defense experts was sort of the large sort of oblong shape of the shoulder. Can you explain how that does not contradict your findings of that shot coming this way, that we see this injury here? And I'm going to actually put up Defense Exhibit 162 to illustrate talking about.
All right. Well, you know, so we've got basically an oblong wound here, and that's because the wound is entering at an angle along the top of the shoulder. It's not hitting the shoulder at a perpendicular angle. So it kind of grazing along the top of the shoulder. Okay, now is this, okay. So, and actually, you know, he said that the pellets are going down. Okay, well, if you look at it as an entrance wound, they're actually going up. So it depends where you're looking at it from. If he's thinking that this is an exit wound, that this is, you know, that the end of the wound path, then it would look to him as if the pellets are going down. But we can see this is actually an entrance wound for a few reasons. First of all, if it were an exit wound, do you remember all those pellet exit wounds on Paul's left arm that came from the chest? The pellets are not just going to stop in the shoulder. There's like no resistance there. The pellets are going to continue going until they exit the left side of the arm. Okay, so they don't just stop there. The reason they're there is that's because they started there. Okay. In addition, you see all of this white material here on the edge of the entrance wound. That's styrofoam packing material that's between the pellets. You know, so the pellets are contained within wadding, and there's styrofoam packing material between. And that would never have been deposited there. So I did not think it was net when I was telling you the direction, my determination of the direction of this wound. I did not have to necessarily, it was my, my expert, I'm an expert at determining, at forensic pathology includes establishing the direction of the wounds. And because of all of these things, this was my determination. Okay, now there's another feature of this photograph. Do you see that this is coming into the left side of the, this is what I determined, left side of the cheek, and we've got all sorts of abrasions around here. Now, it doesn't have the classic, what we saw on Paul's chest had those little petals. So we knew that the wadding was starting to open up. But in this case, there was wadding that was probably open as well. So we have some pellets already starting to come out. It's not entering within the wadding, but the wadding is going along and entering them. And we have all this abrasion around the left side of the chin neck area. And that's consistent with, we're not going to have that abrasion if it's coming out. It's going to push the skin out. We're not going to have an abrasion. So, all that but even just common sense, we have that styrofoam packing material on the outside of the arm. My determination, this went up through the left cheek, out the right side of the top of the head. If it were a shotgun entrance wound, contact to the head, I don't care whether, there's no way his entire facial bones and skin, his ears would have been flopped down. There's so much gas expansion that the damage to his head would have been much worse. So that's based on my experience for doing this. And, I just don't know how, I didn't mention that styrofoam packing, but that's from when the pellets are coming in. And he said, oh, you can see they're going down. That's because he's looking from above. So but if you look at where I believe and I determined by doing this autopsy that the entrance wound is, it's actually going upward. So it depends which side of the pellets you're looking at. And if just logically, if this was an exit, the pellets wouldn't have just stopped there. They've got a huge amount of energy. They're going to continue through the arm and have individual pellets. They wouldn't have all just been concentrated right there. So, we can use our powers of logic, which I think, we all have, to understand how this is an entrance wound that exited the right side of the top of the head.
Dr. Reamer, having specifically, and you can take a seat now, thank you very much. Having specifically addressed the specific criticisms of the defense pathologist, in your expert opinion, having actually done the autopsies in this case, is there any way that could have been a contact wound to the top of the head?
No.
Right. And having addressed the specific concerns of and testimony of the defense pathologist as it relates to Maggie, is your conclusion still that the shot went in the direction as you described before this?
Yes,
jury?
I disagree with his conclusions.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Reamer. Please answer any questions the defense counsel may have.
Dr. Reamer, good to see you again.
Hello.
So, you took pictures, correct?
I took pictures. I wish I took more pictures now, but I took pictures.
I'm sorry.
Yes, I would have. I wish I took even more pictures.
So do we. So, you made notes, which you converted into an autopsy
Yeah,
report.
it's a standard operating procedure.
Yeah, no. But so, and that's done so that somebody else can look at your work and see if they agree or disagree with you. Because
No, the notes are a work product for me while I'm preparing, doing my examination. I don't always, I take notes, I write numbers, but that is really for me so I can incorporate findings into an autopsy report that I'm going to write. And I don't write it the same while I'm at the table. I need to go away. Maybe I'm going to do it the next day, that night. So, but it's not done. People say, oh, can I have a copy of the autopsy diagram? Well, these are not autopsy diagrams that are meant for other people to look at. And sometimes they're not even completely accurate because I mark things on the outside of the body that later on during the course of the autopsy, I determine, I'm like, oh, well, that's what that is. And it may not be what I initially wrote down. But by the time the autopsy is over, I've put it all together. And that a diagram or notes do not necessarily reflect everything, that I concluded.
Do you still have your notes in this case?
I imagine they would be in the file, but as I told you, this is, my notes are not necessarily the conclusion that I came to.
Did you produce them to the state?
I don't know what I did. I personally, yeah, if they were asked for, I'm sure I did.
Did you produce them to us?
No, I don't remember producing them at all. I don't have a request for those notes in my file.
But those notes would be your present sense impression as you're doing the autopsy, correct?
Well, they can have a lot of things written down on them.
But we don't know because we didn't get them, right?
Well, they're not important. What's important is they're my notes. They're for me. They're an aid to the pathologist. So even if I thought something initially, and then while I do the autopsy, by the time I get to the end, it could disagree. I don't necessarily go back and change the diagram. It's my work product. It's for me to aid me in writing my autopsy report. It's not for public view. It's not a statement of my conclusions.
Okay. Did you review those notes before your testimony previously or today?
No.
Okay. So you just go with your report.
Well, I reviewed my report, correct.
Right. But you don't go back and look at your notes.
No.
So let me ask you some basic questions here. You've previously testified that the muzzle of the shotgun for this wound here that goes through his neck and out the top of his head was about 3 feet away.
That would be about right.
Okay. Now, you're familiar with this page from, I believe you've described it.
Oh, yes, I've seen it many times.
Okay. And as you see, the gas comes out, right? In the first shot, the top
Yes.
shot. And then actually there's sort of a blowback of gas as as we can see right here, the projectile, which is the pellets, are extruded from the barrel, right? I mean, the gas pushes the pellets out.
Well, there's gas expansion and that helps propel the pellets. Yes. I agree with the book. This was
Okay.
not a contact shotgun wound to the top of the head.
Okay, well, the book doesn't say that, but what the book does say is that as the pellets come out, at some point they begin to, the container opens and the pellets expand or move out in a pattern, a circular pattern. It becomes bigger as the further away you get, correct?
Yes, and that's what we have here.
Okay,
But this is actually demonstrating specifically a contact shotgun wound to head. But we do have splaying outward of the pellets. We can see on the left shoulder, they're fairly clustered together because they're first starting to be released from the wadding. And they did spread out. We have some of them down in the neck, some of them in the brain. And so they are spreading out. I don't see how, yes, it's a respected treatise, but this is specific to a contact shotgun wound to head. This is what this is describing.
Really?
Well, it's fine. It doesn't matter. I can look at my photos. I can look, if you're going to talk about theory, the photos.
Doctor, Your Honor, I would ask you
complete his
to
answer.
tell the witness to be responsive. She is going on a diatribe. Excuse me. I'm asking the court to instruct her to answer the question as specifically as she can. She goes off on tangents and I'm sorry.
All right, Pruitt, you may continue answering the question.
You remember what the question was?
No, that's your question.
Is this series of shots from the book depicting a contact wound? I think that's what I understand.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. So where, if you step down here, show me please where the contact is with the body or the head. Here, let me give you this pointer.
Well, the contact would be at the first area.
Right here?
Yes.
Well, what's it contacting?
It's not, it's just a theoretical depiction. It's a theoretical.
Is that what the book
depiction.
says?
Yeah. Well, go ahead. I don't recall the exact, why don't you read it to me?
Well, why don't you tell me, is that a contact wound?
I don't know what this is. This is.
That's a shotgun.
That's a shotgun.
That's a shotgun being fired. Those are the pellets coming out.
Object
Those are the
counsel
pellets.
testify.
Yeah, I think, this is a book, showing, the series of steps after a shotgun is fired.
If
But
this-
it has nothing to do with what I found in the body and does not help me determine the direction of the wound.
All right.
And
So,
I'm not going to describe to you, you can read it in the book. I don't remember how he says all of this.
the book isn't testifying. You are. If you've testified, that depicts a contact wound. Yes?
Well, I don't know what this is depicting. It could be that this is a contact wound. I don't know where you're going.
Here's where I'm going. Is that barrel in contact with anything?
It's not in contact with anything. It looks like it's just blowing into the air.
Okay. And that's fine. And your testimony is that barrel is at least 3 feet away from Paul's shoulder. Is that correct?
It could be, depending on the weapon, it could be, it's not closer than 2 feet because we don't have the sibling. But we
No
do
sibling.
have packing material.
Okay. So as we see here, these pellets are beginning to separate. Is it your testimony that those pellets had separated when they hit Paul's shoulder at all?
They are starting to separate. We don't have the complete, widening of it. They're still relatively clustered together, but they're not as close as they would be if they were still contained within the wadding.
Okay. Now, at 2 feet, is there any gas left or is it all dissipated like this picture shows?
Well, what we have here, if there was more gas, if there was a contact wound to here,
It's not a
I
contact.
understand. The gas, you're wanting me to say yes or no, and I
Yes or no.
can't because I have the knowledge to explain how this relates to examining the body.
Okay,
I
so-
don't give theoretical talks or I don't start looking up in this book while I'm doing an autopsy. I use my practical reasoning and my experience and knowledge of things.
If there'd been gas in the wound or when it hit his shoulder or his neck, would you expect to find some physical manifestation of that?
Well, there would have been, a lot more expansion, shoulder expansion. This was fairly contained on the
So
left shoulder.
your testimony is there would have been little or no gas going to his shoulder, to his neck.
Well, there is always some gas, but it's not the kind of gas that we get in a contact shot.
Exactly. So, and you can go ahead and take the stand. Sorry, it's going to take a minute to get, no, not that one. Paul. Paul went that way.
I don't remember the number off the top of my head. It'll be over there somewhere. 160 something, I think.
Ladies and gentlemen, have you go to the jury room for a break. Please do not discuss the case. down. Please do not discuss your testimony with anyone. It'll take about 10 minutes.
All rise and come to order. Quiet. Be seated.
You may bring the jury.
Jury is present, sir.
All right, you may continue.
Oh, I know. I'm sorry. I got it right here. So these guys first. We have her idea. Doctor, I'd ask you to look at this photo and tell me if this is one of the photos from your autopsy.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I need. Thank you. Now, I'd offer this defense exhibit number 195 into evidence, please.
No objection, Your Honor.
Admit it.
So can we put that up on the screen, please? Before I lose it, let me hand this to. Thank you. So, what are we looking at here?
Do you want me to come? Oh, here it is.
No, just tell me what it is.
Yeah, okay. So this is an entrance shotgun wound to the left shoulder area.
Okay, and you a moment ago said something about packing material. What is packing material?
Yes. So there's foam that is frequently within, between pellets.
I'm sorry, just a moment. Your Honor, I can't hear her because of the noise coming through the door. I apologize, but I just need to understand what she's saying. I apologize. May I begin?
Yes, sir.
Packing material. Let's start over again. Tell me again.
Yes. So it's frequently present in the wadding along with the pellets that sort of help keep them together.
Okay, so the wadding, you got the powder, wadding, shotgun pellets, and are these, is it in the pellets or is it closer behind it in the wadding or?
It's within the wadding.
Okay, and you indicated you saw some packing material.
Well, that is very consistent with, with a little bit of packing material that would, as we have pellets going into the shoulder and some of the packing materials depositing on the skin.
And is this a picture of the packing material?
There is some of the white material, yes, on the skin. Correct.
Did you note that in your autopsy report?
No, it was just a general observation.
Okay. Is it important it was there?
It didn't matter to me whether it's there or not, but it does reinforce that it is an entrance wound.
But you concede it was not in your autopsy report.
Well, all the totality of my findings, I don't always write every little thing in my autopsy report. I could go on, that it could be 50 pages, an autopsy report. I include the findings, my determinations, and I could have mentioned it, but I did not.
And why not?
Because it's not always necessary to mention that kind of thing.
Is it evidence of anything?
Well, I do believe that supports an entrance wound, although I don't require myself to see it in order to make that determination.
But you agree with me, it supports your conclusion, correct?
Yes,
And you didn't put in your autopsy report.
that's correct.
Would it be in your notes?
No,
Okay. So, and could you step down here and show me what the packing material looks like? And there's a pointer right over there behind you. You probably want to stand over here so the jurors over there can see it.
yes.
Whatever.
This is what I believe to be consistent with packing material.
And did you remove any of that to be analyzed or forensically examined?
No, I did not.
Okay, and while we're looking at this picture, you can actually see some shot in there, right?
Yes,
And that shot is that, I mean, that's pretty, that area right there is much wider than this entrance wound in his cheek, is it not?
yes, this entrance wound is larger than this re-entrance wound here. And I believe I actually went over this last time. Frequently, there's enlargement of wound as it goes along. But in this case, we have a wound going along the top of the shoulder, so it's going to be oblong. As it enters the left neck area, it's entering more at a right angle, perpendicular to the jaw, so it's going to appear smaller. And that has nothing to do with spreading of pellets.
Okay, well, let's pursue that a little bit more. You see that pellet that's clear, I mean, clearly there. You
This
see,
pellet?
right, and then you see a pellet above it. You see that? Right.
Where?
Right. Let me put my glasses on. Is that a pellet?
Yeah, it may be a pellet. Yes.
Okay, so we have, if you step back just a little bit so this juror can see, we have pellets coming in like this, correct?
Well, they're kind of banging against each other. We have the wound track is from left to right. And we do have pellets that are in there. They didn't continue, they stopped in there, so they're not all continuing through.
Okay, how many pellets were captured in his shoulder?
I captured, I don't know how many I captured. I collected a sampling of the pellets that were along the wound path.
But you took x-rays.
Yeah, but that's not necessarily the total amount, because some of them, exited and some were in the brain. So the x-rays were taken without the brain in the head because the brain came separately.
Okay, but they did send you the brain.
Yes.
Did you take x-rays of the brain?
No, I did not.
Why not?
I didn't take x-rays of the brain
And the
because I
reason- oh, go ahead.
determined that wasn't necessary for me at the time.
To support your conclusion.
I didn't take x-rays of the brain. I guess hindsight is always 20/20. I could have taken x-rays of the brain. I could have taken more photos. I could have taken a photo of the brain at the autopsy. I did not. And I would have liked to, but I can tell from the examination of the body that I had an entrance wound on my left shoulder and it's exiting at the top of the head. It's not a contact wound to the top of the head.
Okay.
That's my determination.
Okay, but the reason you didn't take x-rays of the brain was you'd already reached your conclusion, correct? That you didn't need it because this was an entrance wound.
Well, I did not, because I felt comfortable with my determination.
And decided therefore not to take x-rays of the brain.
Well, I don't always take x-rays of every organ. I was comfortable I would be able to recover some pellets of the brain, and it wasn't necessary to show the spread.
How many cases have you been involved in where the brain literally exploded out of the head? I mean, that weren't suicides.
Where the brain exploded out of the head.
Well, as the book describes it,
Well, I think that the determination that an entrance wound to the top of the head, contact range, all of that gas expansion would not have, the brain would not have escaped that. There would have been a defect, cavity, or fragmentation of the brain, which was not there. You can see the brain actually.
do you remember what my original question was?
What was your question?
Okay, my question was, how many cases have you done an autopsy of a contact wound to the top of the head, which wasn't a suicide?
Very, very few.
Less than one?
I don't remember exactly, but it's not a tip. Usually contact shotgun wounds. Usually contact shotgun wounds are suicides.
And typically it's in the mouth.
They can be under the chin, in the mouth, sometimes they're to the side of the head. There are people that do shoot themselves to the top of the head as well. And I can't recall exactly if, I remember any of those.
And in all those cases, the brain that explode out of the cranium?
No.
Okay. So you would agree with me that the way that well, strike that. Let's go a little bit further with where we're going here. Could you put up the X-ray of the shoulder? You can go ahead and take your seat and testify from up there. Okay, tell us what this is.
Yes, they are pellets, and I have his shoulder, kind of out when I take the wound. We have some pellets remaining in the shoulder area. We have some disruption of the shoulder tissue here, some of the bone, and then we have some. We actually have less. We have more spread. They're more spread out as they're going closer to the neck.
So there are pellets in the top of the arm, the shoulder. Where is this? Right up in here?
Yes.
Okay. And then there's additional pellets, it looks like, down below that, like near his ribs, correct?
That's because it's starting to spread, yes.
And it's starting to spread to get to this place right here.
What place?
Is this where
No, it's in the neck.
It's in the neck. Okay.
I indicated that I recovered. It's over here, then some of it is actually in the trachea as well. So that's the windpipe of the neck. So we have some in the neck. This is the chest area. It did not go into the chest.
Okay, let me see another X-ray, please. What was that exhibit? I'm sorry, I didn't announce it. 112. Okay, let me see the next X-ray. Okay, and where is that?
That is the top of the left shoulder and the left arm.
Okay. And you see a number of pellets there.
Yes,
That would be right in this area right here?
yes.
Okay. Next, there's, I think, one more X-ray. Okay, and are there any pellets here? Or are those the same pellets down there at the bottom?
Yeah, well, we have, you can see, there are pellets here. We can see them in the head. There's sub-pellets in the head. The brain is not within the cranial cavity, but we do see some of the pellets ended up over here on the right side. See, R for right. There's the hole at the top of the head, and some of the pellets they're spread out on the right side of the head.
How many?
Well, I can see there's 3 here.
3?
On the right side of the head.
Okay.
Yes.
So if well, how many pellets are there in a 12 gauge shotgun shell? And these are used primarily for duck hunting.
I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I'm an expert at examining human bodies and determining the injuries that occurred. And, I don't know how many pellets would be. When I took my boards, I may have had to actually know that, but I don't use this information in order. You can ask your ballistics expert.
Well, we did. And I think they said something like,
Objection, Your Honor.
I don't really know the answer to that. I'm not going to disagree with the ballistics expert. I do have a trajectory and exit wound on the right side of the back of the head.
how many pellets were in the body? Left
I
in the
did
body?
not count them. I just collect a representative sample of it. I don't collect all of them, and I don't count all of them.
And we know you don't know how many were in the brain because you didn't x-ray the brain, correct?
That's correct.
But if there were 70 pellets or 75 pellets in his shoulder, his chest, and his neck, and hypothetically, there are anywhere between 135 and 160 pellets in the normal duck shot. That's 40 pellets that travel on, for the sake of argument, correct?
Well,
My math.
I don't
Use
really,
my math.
I don't feel comfortable answering these questions because it's not, the specific ballistics are not my area of expertise.
I'm not going to ask you about
I really don't
ballistics.
feel comfortable answering them. I
Just-
examine human bodies and come to my determinations based on the wounds. And I can see I was correct that this is a shotgun wound to the left shoulder that's going up to the right side of the head. And questions about numbers I really don't want to I can't answer that because, I don't know everything. I'm an expert. I'm a physician. I'm an expert at examining human deceased individuals, determining cause and manner of death.
Okay, let's go back to the original question, and I assume.
I don't know the answer to the shotgun, how many pellets there would be.
We're not asking you how many pellets, but if there are 75 pellets, let's do some math here. This is simple math.
Okay, I can do math.
Okay, 75 pellets we can count in the body, the chest, the neck. And there's anywhere from 135 to 165 pellets in the normal duck shot, 12 gauge shot.
All right, so 75 plus 60, that would be 135. And then what did you say, 70 or 80?
75.
Okay, 75. So we started with 75 plus 75 is 150. So that's your answer. If your question is, you're asking me to do the math.
So my question is this. After those pellets have gone through the shoulder and hit bone, apparently, correct?
Yes.
And then they go through the neck. Do they hit more bone there?
There was some damage to the cartilage of the trachea. It was in the tracheal wall and some muscle. There's not a lot of bone in the neck. The only bone really in the neck
Right.
is the spinal column.
Well, I guess what I'm saying, when you were talking about Maggie a moment ago, and you talked about a shot that I think grazed her skull, you said there was a lot of intracranial pressure. Is that right? Created a lot of intracranial pressure.
Yes.
Okay. So I'm trying to figure out, and maybe you can help me. Your testimony is there was enough, less than half the load that goes through was it one place it hit? It had to go through the brain still.
Yeah. Well, I didn't say that less than half the load went through. Some of it may have actually exited the top of the head. I don't know. Or went into the brain. I did not x-ray the brain. And so I don't know exactly how many, but we can tell that this is the direction.
Was the brain macerated?
No, it was largely intact. There was some maceration at the base of the brain where it was torn from the brainstem. Okay, the brain went up and torn from the brainstem, but it was pretty much surprisingly intact, from a shotgun wound.
Have you looked at the crime scene photos?
I really didn't look at the crime scene photos with any kind of, attention.
Okay, so, but you are aware that the brain was catapulted out of his head, probably hit the ceiling and then landed outside.
Well, I could tell from examining the body that the brain catapulted out of the head because I
Okay.
received the brain and a hole that was consistent with the brain leaving it.
Can you and I agree, and based on your testimony when you previously testified, that there would not be, that the gas from 2 or 3 feet away would not travel through the arm, travel through the neck, and then go into the brain?
Well,
And
there's a lot of material that's going through, and plus we've got fragments of the brain, the skull, of the base of the brain that can also, there's a lot of energy going in that direction. Whether it's gas or not, it's energy from portions of ammunition propelling in that direction. So, whether you want to call it gas or whether it's other thing, I really don't know the theoretical explanation. I'm sure it's in the book. But I examine the bodies and I make the determination on the direction and the type of injury from examining the human body.
The book seems to indicate that the primary cause for an explosion such as this, the brain exploding out, is the gas. You would agree?
Well, I think each case is a little bit different. And the kind of gas that would cause the head to explode would also, I think the book is talking about gas, gas in a contact shotgun wound. So what is your question about the book? I would actually have to refresh my recollection because I don't really I haven't read the book in a long time, but I know what I've seen on the body.
If I quote this to you, you would, and I can show it to you. The gas entering the closed chamber of the head expands rapidly, adding to the pressure waves acting on the bony framework of the skull. The only way for the skull to relieve the pressure produced is to shatter. Do
Yes.
you agree with that?
That actually must be describing a contact shotgun
It is.
wound. Okay, yeah, because that really makes sense for a contact shotgun wound.
And your reasoning for this, the same phenomenon that happened without the gas is?
Well, we've got injury coming from beneath. The skull is, like I told the jury, that is not shattered. We do have some horrible injury, but the shattering of the skull, much of it is still up intact. We don't have shattering of every bone. We don't have shattering of the face. So
Why didn't you shave the head?
why didn't I shave the
Right, were
head?
you looking for any, if much of the skull was still there?
Look, my determination, I didn't shave the head because I was confident that that was an exit wound on the right side of the top of the head. It wasn't necessary for me to shave an exit wound.
So, but if you had shaved the head, and again, apparently you'd already come to your opinion by this point, you could have seen whether it was soot or stippling or any distortion around, or taken samples of the hair and determine whether or not there was any sort of GSR in it, which would be more consistent with a contact wound.
Well, no, GSR can just be we know gunshot residue can deposit in, I'm not like ballistics is not necessarily my strongest suit, but I know that GSR can deposit, within a few feet. Somebody doesn't have to indicate a contact wound.
Okay, so did the shot penetrate the jawbone?
It went through through that area. I believe it actually may have went underneath the bone.
So it did not connect with the bone? Correct?
Yes.
Are any of the pellets that you see in the shoulder, the left shoulder, heading down instead of up?
Well, there's probably kind of a billiard ball effect when these things are going through, and there could be some, directionality but I didn't make that determination because it wasn't important to me to
See
make
which
that
way the pellets were
determination.
going?
What?
To determine which way some of the pellets were
Yeah.
heading?
I can tell from the entirety of my findings at the autopsy. I'm
Okay,
not
so-
the thing is, if you look at something like, a postcard photograph, that doesn't necessarily tell you the whole story. I did my autopsy. I viewed all of the wounds. I was confident in the direction of this wound path. And I'm not trying to say, oh, well, which direction are the pellets going? I can see that there's the entrance wound was to the top of the left shoulder, went through the left side of the neck and out the top of the head.
And how many pellets made it through the brain to the skull? To fracture the skull? How many pellets?
Oh, well, there were some pellets in the brain. I don't know how many.
Because you didn't x-ray it.
Correct.
So since you don't count the number of pellets, tell the jury, please, how you know how many pellets hit the skull and fractured it and allowed this eruption to occur.
I don't know how many pellets. I never said that I did.
No, I didn't say you said it. I just want to know if you know it.
I don't know the answer to that.
And it's not important to you.
It doesn't really matter. It's really very theoretical. I examined the bodies and I made my determination based on examination of the body.
Is it true that an autopsy report should be able to be read by an independent pathologist to come to a conclusion?
Yes.
Okay. Are you ready? Okay, how about put that up for us, please?
Noises,
I'm sorry, sir?
some strange noises. Who's talking? You're questioning the witness? Proceed.
I'm asking Doug to put up exhibit number.
I didn't hear you talking. I heard
Oh, I'm
you were
sorry.
questioning the witness
I
and then
may
a
have
strange
mumbled.
voice
I
comes.
apologize. What's the exhibit number?
Stage 487.
Okay. So, how about step down here, please? And get the pointer for me, please. And stand over there, please, so the jury can see. So you indicated there were, I asked you if you shaved the head. You said no. You said there wasn't, I think your words were there was enough of the skull there to determine what happened. Is there?
Well, I know this is an exit wound from examining the entirety of the findings, and I did not need to shave the hair.
From
That
the,
was my opinion and determination at the time of the autopsy.
yes, ma'am, we understand that, but what, did you look at this to confirm or question your opinion, or have you already come to your opinion?
Well, I always am questioning it myself during the autopsy. It's not just, I look at take a long time to look at everything before I reach a conclusion. Okay, so the totality of findings here told me this was an exit wound. The brain came pretty much intact. It was propelled out at the top of the head. I believe and I'm confident that this is an exit wound, and I did not do further investigation to rule out an entrance wound because I was confident it was not.
So you just said you were confident and you did not look further because you were confident you were right.
Well, I looked at it, and in fact, I took a photograph of it, and this is consistent with an exit.
Is what?
Consistent with an exit. The brain came out of that defect. If it were a shotgun entrance wound, there would be a lot more destruction of the head.
And again, you've never seen a contact wound to the head that wasn't in a suicide case.
I don't honestly remember.
So you don't remember, let me just repeat, you don't remember having a case involving a contact wound to the head that wasn't a suicide case. You just don't remember it.
I may have, it's possible I did not survey. I may have seen one where somebody was shot at point blank range with a shotgun, and then the entire head is gone. So when I get that kind of if there was a contact, whether it's suicide or homicide, the entire head would have been basically blown off.
And so in every case, there's no reason for us to go there because you don't remember ever seeing a case where there was a contact wound and to the back of the head.
Objection asked.
I think it's honestly, whether it's self-inflicted or inflicted by somebody else.
Well,
The features of the body are going to be the same. So that's my answer. And I
Okay.
can't, whether I remember it or not, I've done a lot of autopsies. I don't necessarily remember how many or if I've done one, but I imagine people are shot at close or contact range with a shotgun. And in a contact shotgun, whether it's by suicide or homicide, the entire head would have been basically blown apart. This is terrible. And I know it's terrible. It's probably the worst thing you ever saw, but there would be a lot more damage with a contact shotgun. And that's my professional opinion based on my experience. And if other people disagree with me, that's fine. I don't have to convince them. This is my determination based on my education and multiple years of experience doing autopsies and being a forensic pathologist.
and I think in your testimony, whenever that was, weeks ago, you conceded that reasonable pathologists can differ, correct?
Yes, I think I said, you asked me if a reasonable person, you didn't actually ask me if a reasonable pathologist, you asked me if a reasonable person could have a different opinion. And I remember that because I was sorry that I didn't say, well, of course, reasonable people can think that. But a reasonable pathologist could also think that, but I would disagree with that.
Okay.
I don't think all opinions, a reasonable pathologist could have an opinion like that, but I think it would really be wrong.
Okay. You go ahead and take the stand, please. Have you discussed you've met and discussed with Dr. Kinsey, Kenny Kinsey, about his findings?
I did meet with him once when a couple of weeks prior to the autopsy, I really never, prior to this trial, I met with the prosecution's team. And I would have been available to meet with you if you called me as well. But Ken Kinsey was responsible for the crime scene. What he had to say was, I really wasn't, I already written my autopsy report. I already came to my decision, my determinations based on my examination of the body. And whatever it was, he's going to do the crime scene. So I don't remember having any specific conversation.
You don't remember talking to him about vectors and where the blood spatter would have gone?
Yeah. Well, he asked me, he said, do you know anything about this? And I said, that's your department. I really am not a blood spatter expert. So I had nothing to offer. And I really didn't encourage listening to it because it's not my area.
And let me, say a couple of things. One is, you indicated that you did not put that packing material in your autopsy report, correct?
Yes.
And today's the first time you've ever said anything about packing, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Secondly, let me just sort of summarize this and see if we can get this over with. There are certain things you did not do in this autopsy because you concluded it wouldn't be helpful in reaching your conclusion, correct?
I agree with that.
Like no x-ray of the brain.
I would have been, I did not x-ray the brain, right?
Okay. Your belief is that the shotgun wound to the shoulder being so much bigger is because of the angle?
Yes.
Okay, and then it narrows down to, you would concede as a hole in his neck.
Yes,
Okay. Shotgun starts out wider, that shot starts out wider. I think we confirmed that.
the defect on the shoulder is
Right.
wider because it's kind of going across the shoulder. So it's going to create a defect on the shoulder that's wider than something entering at a right angle or perpendicular. So that's, and I think that makes sense to me. It's consistent with what I've seen in more than 20 years of my practice. And there wasn't anything that seemed odd about that.
And you would concede you're not a ballistics expert.
I know the kind of ballistics, some forensic pathologists know a lot about ballistics. I know probably an average amount.
Okay, and so when you say it started out wider and then came down to this hole, have you discussed that with any ballistics experts?
It doesn't require, that's forensic pathology. That's damage to the body. I don't need to be a ballistics expert, and I've done enough autopsies on shotgun wounds to make that determination without requiring additional ballistics knowledge.
But we can see that the shotgun starts out, the shot starts small and then the pellets expand.
Objection asked and answered, Your Honor.
Objection sustained.
Why are there no shot, why there's no shot in his cheek if it's expanding? Why are there no pellet holes here?
Because they probably we have some wadding going in there.
Probably.
Yeah, I think that is consistent with the wadding. And there are, there's some pellets remaining in the wadding as well.
The wadding going where?
That's an entrance wound. Okay, it's entering perpendicularly. Why do we have, the pellets did not terminate in the cheek. They continued upward.
But a number of them terminated in the shoulder,
Yes,
in the chest, up here, right?
yes.
And then
Not
they-
the chest,
then
the
they
neck,
stop-
not the
I'm
chest.
sorry?
Not the chest, the neck.
But the neck, the shoulder and upper neck, right?
Yes.
And then, if they stop expanding here, so the cheek isn't, one of those pellets is,
Objection asked and answered to the former question.
Your Honor?
It's been asked and answered. I sustain the objection.
And you say these x-rays are consistent with your opinion?
Yes.
Beg the court's indulgence. Oh, let me ask you one question about the Maggie wound. Your position is that the tags don't indicate anything?
Well, they're not determinative. They're something we look at, but the tags on the breast are very non-specific. They're not very good tags. We happen to have nice tags on the back of the skull. Frequently, the tags are more reliable when the skin is tighter over an area.
So on Maggie, you're saying one shot's going up and the other one's going down?
Yes.
Okay. Beg the court's indulgence.
Holly, anything else?
Thank you. That's all I have. Thank you, doctor.
Just two questions. 5,500 autopsies, you said, correct?
Yes, and since I was here last Navy, I've done another dozen, so over 5,500.
And you rely on practical observations of actually observing the body, is that correct?
That's correct. I do my autopsies, and based on my experience and knowledge as a forensic pathologist, I know about the bodies, examining the bodies. That's what I rely on.
And your,
Another two questions, more.
just a couple more, Your Honor. In your opinion, is there any way Paul's face would have remained intact if he had suffered a contact wound from the top of the head?
No,
And in your opinion, is this obviously a wound in this direction as you've described?
Objection, Your Honor. Repetitive. She's testified 5 times. That's her opinion.
The objection is sustained.
Further on.
Thank you. Nothing
Further.
further. Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step
okay,
down.
thank you.
Your next witness.
Your Honor, state calls T.C. Smalls.
Raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that any testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? You will please sir, sit right up here. State your full name for the record and spell your last name, please.
My name is Thomas C. Smalls. Folks call me TC Smalls. SMALLS.
Sheriff Smalls, how you doing today?
I'm doing good.
All right. Tell the jury just a little bit about yourself, and I called you sheriff, so if you just kind of explain that to them a little bit.
Okay, in law enforcement for 39 years, 8 months. I retired in December. 16 years of those 39 years was, I served as sheriff of Hampton County. Been in Hampton County all my life. I'm a pastor. Pretty much married, 4 kids, 7 grandkids, and just trying to enjoy some retirement. I retired December 31st day of December 2022. Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry to pull you back in. You said you just retired, huh?
Yes.
All right. Do you know the defendant, Alec Murdaugh?
Yes, I do.
Have you known him for years?
Oh, yeah.
Did you ever have a conversation with Alec Murdaugh about him asking you permission or even telling you about installing blue lights in his private vehicle?
No, sir. Conversation with Alec Murdaugh. Matter of fact, I never had a conversation with anyone in my 39 years about installing blue lights in their personal vehicle.
That's not something that's done, is it, sir?
Oh, no, no.
Did you know anything about the defendant claiming that you permitted him to do so until he testified to that last week?
Correct. Mm-hmm.
Didn't know anything about
Didn't
it?
know anything about it.
And he never approached you at any point about that?
No, sir.
Did he ever approach you about any threats or anything as a result of the boat case, the boat wreck case?
No, we never have.
Thank you. Nothing further.
Cross-examination.
Well, it's 12:01. Good afternoon, Sheriff Smalls.
How you doing?
My name's Jim Griffin.
Okay.
I'm a little hoarse. This pollen's getting to me, but it won't take long. You've known Alec Murdaugh for many, many years. Is that correct?
Correct.
And he was a volunteer solicitor in Hampton County, 14th Circuit, for a number of years, correct?
I realized he worked along with his father
Right.
as a, I don't know whether I thought he was an assistant solicitor, but he worked along with his father as in Hampton County.
But he held the position of assistant solicitor of the 14th Circuit,
Yes, he did.
and he worked with his father,
Right.
trying cases in Hampton County and perhaps Colleton County and other places. You aware of that?
Correct. Yes, sir.
And are you aware of him trying any cases when it wasn't with his father?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. And his father was, we're talking about Randolph Murdaugh,
Correct.
and he was previously solicitor. Is that correct?
Right.
And are you aware that Alec Murdaugh was issued a badge for that position?
No, I was not.
Okay. And there's some, you were questioned about permission that, whether you gave him permission to have a blue light installed in a vehicle, and you said you did not, correct?
Correct.
Do you know whether Anthony Russell gave him permission?
I can't answer that.
Now, who's Anthony Russell?
Well, during my time when I was sheriff, Anthony Russell was a captain in my administration. He later became sheriff after I retired. He ran and he won the office of sheriff, and he holds office now.
And he was maybe not your right-hand man, but he was pretty high up in your administration.
He was a captain.
Okay. And then Chauncey Solomon, what was his position?
Chauncey Solomon was a lieutenant.
And Perry Singleton, who's passed away, what was his position?
He was a lieutenant.
And you know that Deputy Russell, Deputy Solomon, Deputy Singleton were very close to Alec Murdaugh. Were you aware of that?
Well, I know they knew him. I don't know how close they were.
Okay. And did Gibson install the blue lights on the vehicles for the sheriff's department?
Not for my cars. Most of my vehicles light were done with a company out of Orangeburg, and then later we started working with a gentleman by the name of Charles Mitchell that installed lights, and he out of, I think, Hardyville or Bluffton.
So you don't know who do you know who Eddie Gibson
Oh,
is?
I know who Eddie Gibson. He worked for me at one time.
And when he worked for you, did he install blue lights? He worked on the vehicles, the fleet of vehicles?
No, not my vehicle.
Well, when he worked for you, what did he do?
He was a deputy sheriff. He patrolled.
And so like you're unfamiliar that at any point in time, Mr. Murdaugh had a blue light in his vehicle.
I never had any knowledge that he had blue lights in his vehicle.
Okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Okay.
Your Honor, can I approach, may we approach very quickly? Sheriff Smalls, when did you retire again?
I retired December the 31st, 2022.
2022, so just a couple months ago.
Right.
Thank you for coming today.
Thanks, sir.
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, sir. You call your next witness.
Do you swear or affirm that any testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You would, sir, please be seated. State your full name for the record and spell it. Last name, please.
Paul McManigal, McManigal.
All right. Good afternoon. Sergeant McManigal, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And you're employed with the Charleston County Sheriff's Office?
I am.
And you testified previously in this trial, correct?
Yes, I have.
Just briefly remind the jury exactly what topic you testified on earlier. Briefly, please.
I was tasked with redacting Alec Murdaugh's cell phone records to remove any possible client-attorney privileged information.
All right. And during that testimony, you were not qualified as an expert, correct?
That is correct.
All right. But you have been qualified in previous trials.
Yes, I have.
And approximately how many times have you been qualified as an expert previously in other trials?
About 10.
10 times. Okay. And is that in cell phone forensics?
Part of it was about, heard my notes. 1, 2, 3, 4. 6 times of that was in cell phones forensics. The other was crime scene investigation.
Okay. All right. And just let's briefly go down as quick as you can. Let's go through your training experience in cell phone forensics, please.
Okay. I'm currently assigned to the United States Secret Service Cyber Fraud Task Force, which is where I received most of my training. I have been trained in basic computer evidence recovery, advanced computer forensics, oxygen forensic suite training, blacklight examiner, advanced mobile device examiner, Celebrite physical and logical examination, XRY certification training, Macintosh triage and imaging, Apple iDevice forensics, Celebrite advanced JTAG extraction, network intrusion response, vehicle forensics, digital video recorder evidence and recovery, ransomware investigation.
I don't know what happened. Let me check. Hold on 1 second.
Response training and several other webinars.
At this time, state would seek to admit Sergeant McManigal as an expert in cell phone forensics.
So qualified.
Sergeant McManigal, last week you were present when a gentleman named Micah Sturgis testified for the defense, correct?
That is correct.
And specifically, he testified about this feature in iPhone known as Wake.
Raise to wake.
Raise to wake, correct?
Yes,
sir. And briefly explain to the jury what that function is and what it serves as in the cell phone, for the iPhone, excuse me.
Raise to wake is when the cell phone is laying down and you pick it up. It realizes that somebody is picking up the device and tries to assist by turning on the display so that you could possibly unlock it with your face unlock.
All right. Or read a notification, possibly if there's a notification on the screen.
That's correct.
And so it's designed to turn on that screen when it thinks someone's picking up the phone to look at the screen, correct?
That is correct.
All right. There's been previous testimony, I think, by Mr. Sturgis and other experts in this case that the iPhone, if the screen is off, it will not record an orientation change, correct?
If the screen is off, it will not record an orientation.
You agree with that opinion?
I agree, yes.
And you were asked after Mr. Sturgis' testimony to investigate a little bit more about this raise to wake feature, correct?
I was.
And specifically, as demonstrated with the jurors, the screen's going to turn on when the phone is picked up gently, correct?
That is correct.
Because the phone thinks it's being picked up to be looked at, correct?
That is correct.
You're asked to investigate with a test device whether that screen lights up every time a phone is picked up in a more violent fashion or quicker fashion, correct?
Correct. When the phone is picked up more aggressively or moved more aggressively, the device will not turn on the screen.
And that's because the way raise to wake feature is based off of what in the cell phone? What's telling it to wake up?
The accelerometer primarily.
Okay. And so the accelerometer is sensing motion, correct?
Correct.
And so if it senses a slight amount of motion, it's going to turn the screen on because it thinks someone's picking up to look at it, correct?
Can't lead the witness.
And so if the cell phone only detects a slight amount of motion, what does it do? What does the iPhone do?
So if the iPhone registers a slight amount of motion, it thinks it's being picked up, so it will turn on the screen. But if it's being picked up more aggressively, it won't. And that's a battery protection feature. If you had the iPhone in your pocket and you were jogging, you don't want the screen to stay on the whole time. So when the phone is moving more aggressively, the screen does not turn on.
Okay. And so you're asked to do some tests in your lab with a test device, correct?
That is correct. I obtained an iPhone 11 Pro Max, which is the same make and model as the phone that Maggie had.
All right. And what software version was on your test device?
The software that was on my device is iOS 14.8. The one that was on Maggie's was iOS 14.6. So the iOS that was on my device that I tested was slightly newer.
Okay. And did you perform a series of tests with various motions and various throws with this phone to determine, and were you able to develop an opinion of when the screen might come on and when it might not?
Rule 5, this is an experimental form of evidence, actually something seized, and we have not been provided this.
Objections overruled. Rule 5 does not apply.
Thank you. So you did perform a number of tests, correct?
Yes, sir. Performed many tests over the weekend. I pick it up and shake it, pick it up and throw it. I threw it off to my desk. I knocked it off of my desk. I tried to flip it end over end. I tried to throw it like a Frisbee. I did each one at least 10 to 20 times.
Okay. And were the results 100% conclusively? I mean, did the phone do the same thing every time?
No, not at all. Sometimes the screen would turn on. When I threw it, laying face up, and then the screen would turn on. But a lot of the times I would throw it and the screen would not turn on. It depends on how the accelerometer registered that movement.
So based off of your test, is it your opinion that an iPhone of the same make and model as Maggie's could be thrown and the screen not turned on?
Can't leave the witness.
All right. Did you develop an opinion about whether the screen would turn on every time a phone was thrown?
If the phone is thrown, the screen does not always turn on. In my experimentation, I determined that when the phone is thrown more like a Frisbee, 9 out of 10 times, the screen does not turn on. The times that it did turn on most often was when I pick it up and tried to shake it, then the screen would come on briefly.
Okay. But 9 out of 10 times when you toss a phone like a Frisbee, the screen would not turn on. Correct?
That is correct.
Not far from the state.
Yes, it is. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
When you performed these experiments, did you record them in any way?
I did not.
You didn't video record doing any of this?
I did not.
Did you consider video recording any of these experiments?
Actually, it never crossed my mind.
You just did the experiments and then just sort of orally relay when you could have had a video to show us?
That is correct.
If you were going to throw a phone out from a moving vehicle, wouldn't you need to pick it up to toss it?
Certainly.
And if I understand the previous testimony, when you pick it up, the screen comes on.
When you pick it up gently.
So if you pick it up to toss it out the window while you're driving, you got to pick it up. Is that correct?
Correct. And if you pick it up aggressively, it will not.
But not always.
Not always.
Sometimes will, sometimes won't.
Correct.
According to the experiments that you conducted since, when did you do these experiments?
I started it Friday afternoon and into Saturday.
So you did these experiments this last weekend.
Correct.
You did not record any data.
I did not.
You just played with the phone and are coming here to express your observations.
That's correct.
Do you have the phone that you used to do these experiments with you?
Not with me.
Are you aware of how the phone in this, Maggie's phone in this case, how it, when it was located, what its position was? Have you seen the photos?
I have.
And was it screen up?
It was screen up.
Would you agree then that it had to be thrown from a screen up position, because if it was screened down and you turned it over to throw it out, the screen would come on?
Of course not. It can tumble through the air.
So if the phone was screened down in the car and it ends up screen up over here, it has to turn over, right?
At least one time. Yes, sir.
And do you, I guess, disagree with the previous testimony and demonstration that when you take the phone and turn it over, the screen comes on?
No, when you pick it up gently, the screen does come on.
We say pick it up. If you rotate it on that axis so that it's screen down to screen up, does the screen come on?
If I pick it up gently and rotate it, the screen comes on. If I pick it up aggressively, it does not.
And if it's facing you and rotates 90 degrees, does the screen come on?
Only if you do it gently. Again, if you do it aggressively,
How
it will not.
gently? Did you measure any of these forces?
I did not.
You just threw the phone around in your office?
Absolutely.
So you didn't record what you were doing, and you did not measure any data. Was this because you were afraid that you would have to disclose that data if you recorded it?
Of course not, no.
Do you normally do experiments and don't record any data or video, record anything?
It never crossed my mind to record video.
Do you believe that you would have to disclose that data if you had recorded it?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled.
I believe so, yes.
So the reason you didn't record data was that it would have to be produced, and then we could examine it and discover whether or not it was accurate.
No,
You
sir.
avoided that by not recording anything, correct?
No, sir. That's not correct.
Why didn't you record any data?
It did not cross my mind to video record my experiments. I just did the experiments to determine whether or not
And
the
you
screen
didn't,
would
you
turn
didn't
on.
occur to you to measure how fast you were moving the phone? Maybe to even find out what is that threshold you claim where the phone goes from turning on to not turning on? Exactly when does that happen? You have no idea, do you?
No, sir. It would take me much longer to do these experiments to determine the exact speed and force required to turn the display on versus not.
Did you discover any, or did you attempt to locate any documentation regarding the raised awake feature on the iPhone?
I did. I tried extensively. I reached out to several different forensic surface focus groups that I'm a part of, and we were not able to find any white papers on the subject.
So you were unable to find any actual data on it, so you resorted to throwing your phone around alone? Was anyone with you when you did this?
No, sir. I was alone in my office.
So you're alone in your office, throwing the phone around, taking no measurements, recording nothing over the weekend, and then you come in here and testify as an expert as to what the phone will do.
That's correct.
And testify that it's different than what we've seen it do right here in this courtroom.
That's correct.
Have you ever done this, anything like this before? You'd mentioned testifying 6 times before. Was this your expert testimony in any other case?
When my expert testimony in other cases was always about cell phone reports and the data contained therein. I've never actually done physical experimentation to come up with a realistic result.
So your previous experience was extracting data from cell phones. Is that accurate?
Correct.
Is that what you're trained to do?
Yes, sir.
The training that was listed, it was to extract data from a cell phone?
Yes, sir.
Are you an engineer?
No, sir.
Do you have any certification in engineering?
No, sir.
Do you have any degree, academic qualifications in engineering?
No, sir.
Have you ever worked as an engineer?
No, sir.
You're trained in extracting data from the cell phone.
That's correct.
And when it comes to tossing it around and seeing how it moves, you don't know anything more than anyone else, do you?
No, sir.
So you had this, Your Honor, based on the previous answer, I would move to strike the expert opinion.
On what basis?
The witness just testified he has no expertise in this. That he just said he has no more knowledge about this than anyone else in the courtroom. That his expertise is in extracting data from the cell phone. And that this opinion is therefore outside of his expertise, and this is inadmissible opinion
You previously
testimony.
stipulated that he's an expert.
Yes, Your Honor, in extracting data from the cell phone, which was before we got to this testimony about
Says
this.
the state.
Your Honor, this witness performed a series of tests. He's reporting on, I'm sorry, Your Honor.
We know that. He's testified to that.
And he's expressed his opinion of what the phone will do in those series of tests. It's not an absolute opinion, but I think his opinion of when the screen would light up is something he tested and something he testified.
Anything further?
Your Honor, simply that when he was proffered as an expert before this testimony, it was in extracting data from the cell phone, not in engineering, electrical engineering, which is where he's gone now.
Objections overruled.
So you just testified you have no more knowledge about engineering the iPhone than anyone here, correct?
I know more about how the iPhone works, but no, sir, I'm not an engineer.
You're not an engineer. When you said that the accelerometers are what trigger this feature, how do you know that?
That's from data that's on Apple's website.
So you found something on Raise the Wake that says that the accelerometers are what trigger this feature?
No, sir. That's the only thing that is capable of detecting motion on the phone besides GPS.
And you have no idea how much motion is required because you didn't measure, correct?
No, sir. I don't know the threshold.
Okay. You, this weekend, sat around your office by yourself, recording nothing, tossing the phone around here, and are now reporting those results as an expert in What?
In cell phone forensics. I understand how cell phones operate more than most people.
Do you understand the electrical engineering? Do you have any background in that?
I am not an engineer, no, sir.
Do you know how the accelerometers in the iPhone work? Can you tell us?
Not exactly, no, sir. But I know that they exist, and I know that's how the iPhone determines motion.
So there's an unknown device within the phone that detects motion in a way that you don't understand, and some amount of motion that you don't know how much because you didn't measure it does something that only you saw in your office this weekend. Is that
Well,
correct?
no, I know what that is. It's the accelerometer. The accelerometer is what detects the motion, and that's what causes the iPhone to race to wake.
How does an accelerometer detect motion?
I'm not an engineer. I do not know how it detects motion. I just know that it does.
But sir, you really haven't said anything you couldn't quickly find out on Google. Isn't that correct?
Probably, yes, sir.
So you have no expertise in this.
I have expertise in how cell phones work.
What do you mean by that? How cell phones work?
So I can tell you all about the knowledge C databases. I can tell you about the way iPhones are not iPhones. I can tell you the way some software is written, what kind of code it's written in. I can tell you how data is stored on the cell phone, the programming that's involved with the iOS feature, and the different databases that are involved.
Can you tell us that if somebody was driving down the road, picked up a phone that was either on the seat or pulled it out of a pocket or something like that, and while continuing to drive, threw it out the window, that the screen would not come on if it landed face up?
I cannot tell you that it will not come on. I can tell you that it might not come on.
Because when you were alone, throwing your phone around, you think it didn't come on sometimes.
Objection sustained.
No further questions.
Anything further?
Just real quick. When Mr. Barber was asking about picking up a phone and then tossing it, about the razor wake, what Mr. Sturgis demonstrated jury was a gentle pickup, correct?
That is correct.
And you test a more violent pickup or a more aggressive pickup and then moving to a throwing motion, correct?
Yes, sir. I just picked it up and threw it.
All right. And based off of what you tested and you observed, the screen does not come on most of the time?
When
do
you
that?
throw it like a Frisbee, it's most of the time. When you throw it end over end, it's more than half the time it will not come on.
All right. And Mr. Barber asked you several times whether you knew more than anybody else about these cell phones, correct?
Correct.
And in particular, in this instance, you do know more than most people because you performed a series of tests, correct?
Objection sustained.
You performed multiple tests over the weekend, correct?
That's correct.
Objection sustained.
What did you do this weekend?
This weekend, I performed multiple tests on a device matching the same make and model as Maggie Murdaugh's to determine whether or not the raise to wake feature would always enable the screen to come on whenever the phone is thrown.
And Mr. Barber asked you several times about being an engineer, correct?
Correct.
And did you hear anything out of Mr. Sturgis last week that indicated he was an engineer?
No, sir.
And do you testified you don't know exactly how the accelerometer works, correct?
That is correct.
Is that knowledge necessary to observe when a screen turns on and when it does not turn on?
No, sir.
Not perfect.
Anything further?
One question. How many times do you have to run this experiment for your results to be statistically reliable?
I'm sorry, say it again.
How many times do you need to run this experiment for your results to be statistically reliable?
More than 10?
What your basis for that is?
Does it take that long to figure out that sometimes it turns on and sometimes it doesn't?
Do you know how to measure reliability using statistics?
I took statistics in college. Yes, sir.
Do you know how to measure reliability using statistics?
Yes, sir.
How do you do it?
Well, you have to have a performative sample. You have to have a default group that has no change to it, and then you have to have your sample group where you actually perform a change. You take the data, you put it into a formula. It gives you a degree of reliability.
Did you do that here?
No, sir.
No further questions.
Step down. Call your next witness.
Your Honor, state calls Mark Ball.
Do you swear or affirm that any testimony you give today will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? I do. All right. Mark, thank you, sir. You'll be seated and state your full name for the record. Your last name, please, sir.
It's Mark Ball, last name B-A-L-L.
How you doing today?
Be doing better if I wasn't here.
I hear you. Well, we'll get you out of here pretty quickly. I wanted just to ask you a few very quick questions in response to the defense case. And first question I'd ask you is, prior to the murders of Maggie and Paul, did you ever hear Alec express any distrust of SLED?
No, sir.
Can you tell the jury what your observations were of his relationship with the law enforcement community?
I thought it was very good. I mean, he interacted with them regularly, as most civil lawyers do, and then with his side gig as, solicitor, he obviously had interaction with them as well.
Do you remember coming to find out that Alec had installed blue lights in the private vehicle?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury roughly how long ago that was?
I can't tell you precisely. I can tell you it wasn't the vehicle that's been seized. He got that vehicle in the end of December before the murders occurred in June. So he'd had that vehicle about 6 months roughly. And it was on the vehicle that was prior to that. And it was a Suburban as well. I don't remember when in that chain that they were actually installed, but it was some time.
Do you have some property around in this area?
I do.
And are you a hunter and an outdoorsman and shooter?
I am.
All right. Do you ever shoot hogs and other nuisance creatures?
A bunch of them.
And when you're riding around looking for hogs, what can you do that in the daytime?
Yes.
And is it not uncommon to see hogs during the daytime?
I shot 2 weeks ago. I shot 5
during the daytime.
During the day, 4:30. They come out, all different times, but the more pressure you put on them, the more nocturnal they'll become. But they eat all the time, and they root, and the rooting's what the real problem is. They root up your roads and fields and everything else.
Have you ever known the defendant? You've known the defendant for how long?
34 years.
You were the defendant and his family had a number of long guns, rifles, and shotguns?
Yes.
Have you ever known him to talk much about target shooting a pistol?
No, sir.
You know what Paul's weapon of choice was when shooting hogs?
Shooting
hogs.
The 300 blackouts were bought for hog hunting. I assume Paul would have shot them with anything he had, but that's what the 300 blackouts were bought for.
Did you have any conversations with the defendant when he was purchasing the original 2 blackouts as it relates to hog hunting?
I did. I'm not a big 300 blackout fan, and I told him that, and he bought them anyway. And I think his cousin actually put them together. It was a game warden.
In the time after the murders, did you have a number of conversations with the defendant about his activities that night?
I did. I had that night and then subsequent days.
And did you go over those in fairly some sort of detail?
Yes, sir. At times, sometimes it wasn't detailed. You know, it would just be checking on him to see how he was doing and to see, you know, if they'd come up with any leads or where things stood. I mean, everybody was trying to figure this out. I mean, this is one of those lightning strikes in life that just jolts you and there's no rhyme or reason.
What, if anything, did he say about whether or not he checked Maggie and Paul before he called 911?
As I testified before, my recollection of it was that he testified, or he told me, not testified, but he told me that he went to Maggie and then he went to Paul, rolled Paul over. His phone, I didn't hear the phone the first time he said that. I think that was about the second or third time. But I also wasn't really listening. I was listening to what occurred, you know, who did this? Why would they have done this? But the second time he went, it was reversed, where he went to Paul and then to Maggie. And like I told you before, I don't know whether that's just a slip, you know, from one to the other or vice versa, but he definitely went, checked on him, then called 911.
When was the first time you heard his admission and claim now that he did go to the kennels around 8:44 p.m.?
Thursday, last
This past
Thursday.
Thursday.
Yeah.
And was he clear prior to that he did not go down there in his conversations with you?
Never said anything about that or any reason for it. It just, he'd never been there.
You said you've known the defendant for how long?
34 years.
Knowing what you know now, was he able to look you in the eye and lie convincingly and effortlessly to you?
Objections overruled.
I mean, it's pretty obvious. I didn't know the stealing. I didn't know any of that. And, you know, it's not the way a plaintiff's practice works. You work on your own cases unless you're working with somebody else. And so you wouldn't necessarily be talking about his particular cases. So it's sort of yes and no. I mean, obviously, a lot of things that I was told and a lot of things just weren't there. I mean, the blue lights, the reasoning for the blue lights, the money missing from our account when he cashed the 2 checks, all of those types of things, you know, obviously they weren't truthful.
And did you feel like you knew the defendant well prior to June?
Sure thought I did.
The defense.
Good afternoon, Mr. Wall.
Good afternoon.
Just be clear, after the Labor Day weekend when Alex was confronted by the law firm.
Well, it was before Labor Day.
Yeah,
It was Thursday.
Friday or Thursday
Right.
before.
It was the Friday before we confronted him.
You ever talked to him since the day he was confronted?
I talked to him on that Monday when I believe that he and Randy and John were going to, I believe, Atlanta,
Okay.
to the facility down there. And I got a phone call, I don't know, 1 or 2 o'clock, whatever it was. I was coming from the office. I'd been digging through his files and stuff, and I got a call. It registered as John Marvin, and I picked it up and said, "What you need, John?" And it was Alec.
And that would have been Labor Day 2021?
That would have been Labor Day 2021.
And since Labor Day 2021, you've not spoken with Alec?
I have not.
And since Labor Day 2021, Alec has either been in rehab or jail, is that correct?
He has been, to my knowledge. I mean,
So you've not had any opportunity, I mean, he's been represented by counsel as well, right?
sure. I mean, I wouldn't expect to. you know, he's being charged with crimes.
So you wouldn't have any expectation that since September 2021, that he would come to you, talk to you about whether he was on the video, whether it was at the kennels or where he was, correct?
No, not since September.
Okay. You were asked questions about Alex distrust of SLED, and you testified that he had a good relationship with law enforcement.
He did. I never heard any mistrust of SLED or anybody else
Well, let's talk about that.
from him. I mean,
Well, did Alec take the position that his son Paul was wrongfully charged for felony boating under the influence, causing a death and serious bodily injury as a result of the boating accident?
yes, I mean, I think he disputed that and was planning a vigorous defense of that.
And that happened, those charges have been pending since 2019, is that correct?
4 years ago, a couple of days ago.
Right. And so he did express some dissatisfaction over that case, correct?
Well, over that case, but I don't know that it was directed at law enforcement or who it was directed at. It was just, it wasn't, he didn't specifically say or didn't say, I distrust SLED or I distrust Beaufort County Sheriff's Department or DNR or whoever. It was just, he thought that there was defensible, it was a defensible case, the criminal charges against Paul. And, you know, there was this back and forth as to whether it could have been one of two people driving.
And you were informed, I believe, sometime in the spring of 2021 that SLED was actually investigating Alec for obstructing the boating accident investigation, right?
No, sir.
You were not aware of that?
I was not aware of that.
Do you know whether Alec was aware of that?
I have no idea what he never said that to me. I didn't know about anything to do with the investigation until the grand jury, when I went to the grand jury.
Were you aware that he and his father sat in on the criminal prosecution of his good friend, Greg Alexander?
I became aware of that. Well, back up. Yeah, I knew they went over there. I didn't know much about the detail until after the SLED came in after the 3rd of September 2021.
And Chief Alexander was prosecuted after SLED investigated him, correct?
I think that's the case, yes.
And that Alec and his father thought that Chief Alexander was wrongfully accused. Are you aware of that?
I don't know what they thought about it. I know that they were close to Greg Alexander, and Greg Alexander ultimately got off on a jury trial.
Now we do know that the Colleton County Sheriff's Department in this case recused themselves because Alec was.
Let me correct something. I said that he got off. He was found not guilty.
Right.
I mean, I don't want there to be a negative implication. I know Greg as well.
Sure.
So,
well, thank you for clarifying that. And we do know that Sheriff Buddy Hill and the entire Colleton County Sheriff's Department recused themselves in this case because of Alec's close relationship with the Colleton County Sheriff's Department and law enforcement. Is that right?
I know they recused themselves, and I know they called in SLED that night. I wasn't privy to the reasoning, but I would make that assumption.
And there are different levels of law enforcement agencies, right? There's say the Town of Hampton Police Department, Hampton County Sheriff's Department, and Alec had a really good relationship at that level with those folks, correct?
He did.
And he had a really good relationship with the Colleton County Sheriff's Department, to your knowledge?
He did as far as I know, yes.
Right. But I think think I covered that. So you mentioned that hogs become nocturnal when there's a lot of pressure on them?
They can.
They
But
can?
It depends on a lot of things. Like right now, the swamp's up. They're much more on the hill
Right.
than when times are dry. They go out into the flat swamp and root up everything out there.
And the pressure that you're referring to is hunting pressure.
Yeah.
And are you aware that Paul put a lot of pressure on the hogs at Moselle?
I knew Paul hunted hogs a lot of places. At one point, Paul had hog dogs and would hunt on people's property. He came to my property, he went to Ronnie's. But how much pressure they were putting on them, I don't know because I wasn't over there. I mean, I'd ridden around their property several times, but it wasn't about hog hunting.
Sure. And I want to ask you about the Moselle property track. So, we've all seen drone photos of the house and the kennels and Moselle Road. That's sort of right in front of the residence.
Yes.
Right. And then if you're sort of looking from a drone and we've seen some aerial photos, I guess if you're headed south, there's the dove field right adjacent. Is that south? I would think.
Yeah, at least east.
Okay. And then back behind the Moselle residence, I think there's a river.
Well, there's a swamp.
The swamp
and then
begins.
the big Salkehatchie is back in there.
So the swamp begins behind the house and goes, I don't know, is that west?
Sort of south.
Right.
If the runway's running east and west,
Okay.
then it would be
But
south.
But the swamp is behind the house.
It's behind the house.
Okay. And across the street from the house is duck pond and shooting range and no swamp.
Correct. Timberland.
And all the hogs are going to be behind the house.
Mhm. They're all over. They follow. There's a watershed ditch in there. They follow wherever, but predominantly they seek refuge or whatnot in the swamp. But they can be anywhere. I have them. There's gum ponds and every place else, and they just trample wherever they want to go. But you're right. By and large, they're in the swamp because it's wooded.
Right.
And thick.
And in the month of June, pretty warm, is it not?
It usually is here in South Carolina.
Yes, it is. And do hogs stay in the swamp more in the heat of the summer?
I haven't noticed that, and I've killed probably well over 1,000 hogs.
All right.
And so we trap them all the way through. I mean, I've got 2 traps well, actually I got 6 traps, but I mean, I trap them, I shoot them, they're just a scourge. They eat everything. They root up your roads. They get in your pine trees when they're little, they'll root them up. They're a teetotal nuisance. I carry a gun with me most of the time.
Do you have a gun with a thermal scope so you hunt them at night?
I do have a thermal, and then I have others.
Yeah, Mr. Small, is there ever a time when you don't have a gun with you when you're traveling around?
Only if I forget it.
Okay.
But
that's what I thought.
Usually I have one.
And you understood that Maggie and Alec got 300 blackouts from Paul and Buster for Christmas one year, and they came with thermal scopes.
I do.
And are you aware that Paul had his lost or stolen?
I was.
And then he received a replacement without a thermal scope.
Right. My understanding was it had a red dot.
And that he didn't use that one very often. He used Buster's that did have the thermal scope. You've learned that?
I've heard bits and pieces. I haven't been watching everything, but I did.
Right.
Somebody told me that, or I heard it, one or the other.
And Buster's is sitting here in the courtroom. Were you aware of that?
I didn't. I assumed y'all had.
Okay.
I know that the black one was taken from the house because I was standing there.
Right. That's fair.
But you wouldn't use a thermal
In the daytime.
in the daytime for the most part. I mean, you could, I suppose, but it wouldn't serve much purpose.
There's been some discussion about Alex emoting and being emotional during trials. He's an emotional person altogether, isn't he?
I think he probably is.
I mean, you remember him speaking at when his dad got the order of the Palmetto, for example.
I do.
And he'd get emotional then.
Yeah.
And you remember him speaking at the trial lawyers after he had finished up his term, and he got emotional then.
Well, I wasn't there for that. So.
Oh, you missed that. Okay. But you've seen him get emotional frequently.
Sure, everybody gets emotional.
And he was extremely emotional after losing Maggie and Paul.
There's no question about that.
One last point. Do you recall reading or learning on the morning of June the 8th that statement was released through the Colleton County Sheriff's Office that says, at this time, there's no danger to the public. If information is received that dictates otherwise, we will immediately notify the public?
Yes.
Did that concern you?
Very much.
And why did it concern you?
Well, I had been over there that night. I left 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, came home, laid down for a little while, took a shower, and then I heard that. And I got on the phone with Sheriff Smalls on my way into work about 7:30 or so. And I asked him if he knew anything about what that was about. And he said, I don't know, I'll check. And then later that evening, the lieutenant from over here called me and he explained that they didn't have any credible threats against anybody other than, they didn't have any threats, period, but they didn't have any, there was no knowledge, no information about anybody else being in harm's way. And we had probably a 30 or 45-minute conversation, and it didn't leave me any more. I guess I still had questions because we have 60 or 70 people that work for us.
Sure.
And the last thing I wanted was somebody coming in and blasting up the place. And so we made the decision to lock the doors, and we did that for probably a couple months.
All right.
And just like we're doing now.
Thank you. Indulgence. That's all. I have none.
Anything further?
You were asked a little bit about Colleton Sheriff's Department recusing themselves. Are you aware that they continue to assist on the case?
I know they were out there, and I wouldn't, the internal politics of who's lead and who's not lead. I mean, I know that they were there because one of the deputies called me the next morning and asked me where Paul's truck was, and I called Alec and verified where it was and told, I had several interactions with them. So yeah, they were still involved. They weren't.
And for the first few months of the investigation, the local solicitor's office was still running the investigation, to your knowledge?
As far as I know, they were out there. Mr. Stone, his chief assistant were out there, and an investigator were out there the next day. And I want to say they were out there maybe 2 days, but to lend whatever assistance they could lend, I guess.
And that'd be the same
And then I think it was August. I saw it like everybody else in the paper that Mr. Stone had recused himself.
And that'd be the same office for which the defendant had a badge. Is that correct?
Correct. He was an assistant, and so was his father.
All right. Thank you. Nothing further.
Just briefly, Mr. Ball, isn't it correct that law enforcement does the investigation, solicitor's office does the prosecution.
That's the way it normally works.
Thank you. That's all.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to break, excuse the jury now till 2:15. Please do not discuss the case.
All right, guys. So what's wrong with my camera? Oh, I'm using a different camera. That's why it picked up the different camera. I'm going to get off of here. I might be back in just a few minutes. I'm going to see if I have enough time before I go pick up my boys for school. They have something planned this evening, so, or just in a little bit. So thank you all for being with me. I appreciate it. We are going to be talking about Alec Murdaugh and the long line of gambling that he has done, and we're going to be talking a little bit about Summer Wells. So I will probably be back in probably 5 minutes, 10 minutes max if I'm coming back. Okay. Otherwise, I will definitely be doing a live this evening with that. So, all right. Thank you all so much for joining me. I appreciate it, and I'll see you guys in just a little bit. Love you all. Hit the like button if you haven't yet, please. I'd appreciate it. Thanks.